either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And finally, we're back at our favorite time of year, spooky/spoopy season.
Hooray!
Yay. I have been excited for this for, as always, a while.
Yes.
Taking on too much, but still.
Yeah.
It's Halloween. I have to this time of year.
Exactly.
So. And this year, we started off with my pick.
Yes.
Where we went with something a little spooky, but a little bit more conventional. Something
the whole family can enjoy.
Well, I mean, my family knows about this movie because of me, as most of these are. But I did want to go something more conventional rather than like the standard out of left field. Like no one's gonna know this movie besides like Sugi, kind of.
Yeah.
One. So this year, I decided to go with Silent Hill.
The first one.
The very first one.
Yeah.
Well, there's only two, but...
I mean, for now.
For now. Konami is I recently found out Konami is potentially working on a new Silent Hill game, so we shall see.
We will always.
Yeah. So, before we get into it, what are we drinking today, Chris?
You very cleverly realized...
Not very cleverly. I was drinking when I thought of this.
That one of our leading characters is played by none other than Sean Bean, whose name is one letter off than Jin Bean. So we're drinking Jin Bean.
Cheers.
Cheers.
My genius frightens me.
It's very good.
All right. So, Silent Hill, for those who don't know, is a 2006 psychological horror mystery film directed by Christophe Gaines. Mm-hmm. I'm butchering it. It's French. And it was written by Gaines, Roger Avery, and Nicholas Boukrieff.
Yep.
I do apologize. Again, I suck at French.
Yep.
Yeah. And for those who also don't know, it is based on Konami's 1999 video game of the same title, as well as a handful of nods to the rest of the franchise, because by 2006, the first 4 main title installments had been released.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, normally what we try and do is we like to keep the movie and its source material a little bit more separated, try and judge them as standalone, as films are adaptations and can never really translate from one medium to the next, especially in video games.
Oh, yeah.
And, and to be honest, Silent Hill and a lot of these puzzle games that are being turned into movies, that'd be boring as shit to watch.
Yup.
But I will make notes of references and some little trivia here and there between the two. And that's just because I think this is one of those series where they're so closely intertwined that you have to kind of pull out a little bit. And that's also one of the follies of these types of adaptations, is that because they're somewhat interlaced, you can't really pull them apart. So. Yeah,
which, depending on whose side of the fence you're standing on, is either a pro or a con.
Yes.
For people who really like the video game franchise, a lot of people lovingly call this one of the better adaptations.
Yeah.
Some people say it's the best. That is an argumentative point. But for those of us who really feel that, like, a movie most certainly can be an adaptation and should strive to, like, remain somewhat faithful to its original sources, you do want your general audience who's never played a PS2 horror video game to know what's going on, and so I can see why some people thought this movie was crap.
Yeah, and I'll get into some of that in a little bit.
Definitely.
And at this point, I do want to note my sources for this episode includes all the interviews and special features from the Shout Factory Collector's Edition DVD, which is a fantastic edition.
It has a whole bunch.
Yeah, especially the interview with the director. Yes,
that was a very good one.
He is the first French director I've listened to commentary on that I have actually had, like, I appreciate you, dude.
I thought you would.
Yes.
He's a freaking nerd.
Yes. As well as I pulled some of the information for the speculation and symbolism, some of the basis from that from the Silent Hill fandom wiki, because this game is, by extension, is heavily symbolic and interpretive. So take their and my opinion of this with a grain of salt.
And I purposefully didn't look at it through the symbolic lens, because when you were like, hey, there's so much symbolicism in this, I went, I want to see if I can see it myself. So we're going to compare, contrast some notes.
Yes. Also, this is a bit of a warning, heads up. We haven't had too many of these episodes that we've had to be a little bit more blanket on, because there are, for as light, and
yes,
quote unquote light, this movie actually deals with a lot of mature subjects, including child rape, child sacrifice, as well as abuse. So
yes,
get ready. A lot of the symbolism comes from that, so there's going to be talks of that. Just heads up.
Yeah.
Just the nature of the movie.
Yeah, however, I will say this. As someone who went in without pre-reading the symbolism, you can totally get through this movie and not get those items.
Yes.
Feel free to skip the dialogue part.
I don't know if I told you this, but I do want to mention that this is kind of my second go-around of doing a deep dive into this movie, because in college, this is the first movie I actually wrote an analytical paper about.
Of course it is.
And that time specifically was focused on the roles of gender in this movie.
Okay.
And the roles of gender in horror in general. So that's what I started coming back. This is kind of like my second big pass in doing a deeper dive into a lot of the other stuff that I can speculate more about now. I have never actually finished a Silent Hill game. I've gotten pretty far into them, but I suck at these games.
They are challenging.
Yes. And so for those who have not noticed, because I want to bring this up early on, in horror, gender roles are generally flipped in regards to survival. And this is just a very rough generalization. The actions of men that would normally, that normally are taken or seen as masculine, to keep people safe or protect others, leads to those characters' deaths, while the normal feminine roles lead to safety. And again, broad generalization, but it's a rough framework of how I originally started viewing Silent Hill and horror films in general.
Sure.
So the adaptation, turning Silent Hill into a video game, actually started really with the French director Christophe Gans.
Oh, did it?
He is a genre director famous for Brotherhood of the Wolf and Crying Freeman, as well as later an adaptation of Beauty and the Beast.
Yep.
As you said, Gans is a bit of a nerd.
Specifically for Silent Hill.
Yes.
And to an extent, other things in like the nerd realm in general, because later on through some of his interviews and some of the written interviews that I found of him, he throws in a ton of things where he's like, I pulled from this and 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 this.
Oh,
and
yeah.
this. And you're like, I'm sure you did, but I didn't see it. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like we've reached a level of nerd that is different than the nerd we talked about with James Cameron.
Yeah.
James Cameron was a specific targeted nerdism, whereas this gentleman is much more of the broad standard basement nerd.
Yeah, he's my kind of nerd.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So to give some of Gaines' background, he is a American B movie nerd, which we both have that same love.
Yep.
He loves comics, video games, and manga. Because after Crying Freeman, which was a live adaptation of a manga series, he bought a PlayStation and became obsessed with playing it. Specifically, Tomb Raider and Silent Hill are two of his favorites that he mentioned. Side note that he also likes to bring up kind of proudly. When Silent Hill was released in France, there were only 150 copies printed, and he owned 2 of them.
Of course he did.
Yeah. But in this, he realized that movies would have a competitor, as he's, at the same time with Crying Freeman, he was getting better reviews for his movie in game magazines than he was in like the traditional film circuits.
Sure.
So
I mean, they were more popular at the time than B films were.
Yeah, he's one of those directors who's very much understands the game and understands how it works cinematically.
Yes.
And in this, he realized that the cinematic qualities of Silent Hill, he reached out to Konami that he was the right guy for the job, and he wanted to tune them in that he had made a video addressing his love for it, and I think he had done like a couple shots of how he was going to approach the movie to begin with.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I think some other big name actors were trying to get their hands on it, as a lot of them do, because it's the hot topic of the time.
It was, but he didn't just reach out. He sent them like a 15 or 30 minute long video that he had then someone transcribe into Japanese for him.
Yeah.
And it was just a, like, nerd letter of, like, how much he loved the game and how often he'd played it. And, like, if you let me do this, I will be so happy. Not just because we'd be making money, but because I want this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and from that, I think that just ended up reflecting through a lot of the movie. Because with all the interviews you hear is, like, some people didn't get paid well enough on it, but they don't care. They were there because they loved it. Like, this was... this was a big taking on, especially in the early days of these type of games.
Oh, sure.
Or these adaptations to begin with.
Well, and you have to remember, too, that, and, like, granted, I wouldn't say the world has gotten a lot better, but the world of video game to movie adaptations had been mostly crap.
Yeah.
Like, not even like, oh, that wasn't that great, it missed some point. Like, just straight up bad adaptations up until this point.
Because up until this point, I think the best one was Resident Evil.
Yes.
The first one, because that one actually that one had the same kind of spirit that the Silent Hill did.
It definitely did, but it lacked a lot of the, like, there was a lot of, like, disconnect between it and the video game that it was supposed to be from, that caused a lot of people to be like, yeah, I mean, you did it, but, like, this isn't the same.
Yeah.
It's close, but it's not quite it.
Again, puzzle horror games are boring to watch as a cinematic piece.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah. But Gaines also mentioned that he knew an adaptation was going to be tricky, as he had to toe the line between pleasing the fans as well as being able to make people unfamiliar with the game, bring them into the world. And I fell into the latter, because I saw the movie first, and the only horror games I had really played at that or had seen at the time was my cousin played through Resident Evil Code Veronica, and tangentially I owned Devil May Cry.
See, I was the opposite. I didn't get to play the games because I was not allowed to own them. They were too scary. But I did have a friend whose older brother had them. And so we stayed up many a nights playing all of them.
That's how I saw Resident Evil. It was my cousin. Yeah. But Gaines also mentioned that in writing the script, he found the best way to introduce an unfamiliar audience with a relatively complicated and surrealist plot was to, or just an absurdist plot, was to start off with the simple concept, and that was motherhood.
Sure.
And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go on.
Okay.
As well at the time of the making of the movie, Gaines was in touch with fans explaining what he was doing and why he was doing it. And he wanted to show that he understood the source material, but he also was trying to convey that early on that he couldn't make the game into the movie. He could take elements from it and adapt it, hence an adaptation.
Yes.
So
Which for some fans is like the golden rule. Like, that's what we want. And for others, that missed the mark really heavily for him. But I think the way he did it made him more successful than any of the previous attempts.
Exactly. And also, before we get into the movie, there is a little bit of note that this movie does draw inspiration from a real-life town of Centralia, Pennsylvania.
In fact, it was the working title while they were, trying to film.
Yeah, and not to go too far into it, Centralia is a town that's had a coal fire burning under it since 1962.
Oh, no, not the gates of hell.
now it's closed off. I mean, you can hike into it or whatever, but the ground's collapsing, and supposedly they estimate if it's going at the rates now, it still's got about 250 years till it burns out.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Just a side little trivia.
It is a cool thing, and if that interests you at all, it's not the only town on fire. This is a whole rabbit hole you can go down of mining towns that are still on fire. It's fascinating.
Huh.
It happens not a lot, but just enough.
Just enough, like,
It's the equivalent of, like, when you get sucked into the rabbit hole of, like, finding out that people live in other people's attics.
Yeah, I actually sent a video to my mom, Sam O'Nella Academy, his video on, non-water floods.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of rabbit hole where there's not a lot of examples, but there's enough for you to Google it.
There's enough to have a Wikipedia page.
Exactly.
All right, so into Silent Hill.
Yes.
We open up with a couple trying to find their child who has seemingly run off in the middle of the night.
Ah, yes.
One thing I do like to point out about this is he does start off heavily with symbolism from the get-go with the bridge that kind of parallels actions down the line of, like, crossing at the threshold.
Sure.
A little bit.
I will say that this movie has a weird line to toe with the symbolism.
Yes.
Because it chose is kind of a weird word, because he did choose a lot of the style for this, because the game visually doesn't have a ton going on.
Yes.
I mean, it was 2000. It's PlayStation 2.
No, the first one was PlayStation 1.
It's PlayStation 1
before
graphics.
2000, before Y2K.
Yeah. Graphically, not a lot going on at the time.
No, but so
like when he chooses to specifically start off with a dark undertoned red palette, like, it is a choice. Bridges are a choice, but at the same time, he also chose industrial as the underlying factor, which lends itself nicely to, like, interpretation, but also is just industrial.
It's a good point, because I'll pull into the industrial thought in a little bit, which
yes.
I am horrible with color palettes, so I don't even try anymore.
Once we get a little farther, I'm going to see if you noticed one of the biggest color palette changes in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Also under the bridge, there is a nice little nod to the game in the form of graffiti. That's the name of Cheryl, which is the name of the daughter in the movie, but in the movie her name was changed to Sharon.
Yes, I liked that a lot.
Yeah, just the nice little nods.
Yeah, definitely.
Which they had a retcon in the next one. And so the daughter, Sharon, seems to be being called by something as the family stops her from falling off a cliff as she's looking down into it in kind of this dreamlike state. And we have, like, the first kind of inklings that something is not quite right with this girl, because there's this transition from this dark chasm that we assume there's a river and woodland underneath, but it transfers into this decaying...
Into the mines of the Moria?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mines of... I hate that you pointed that.
And now you'll never unsee it.
No, I won't. And so, in this scene, there is still inklings of stuff. Sure. The cross in the background is a nice touch, as religion is what causes the suffering, and it's kind of almost glowing like a portal in the dark, kind of like the neon sign calling, just a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely lit up enough that you can tell, because this movie, despite having, like, definite daylight scenes, mostly dark. And they did a nice job with this, because I'm one of those people who I can't see dark movies, I can't see dark video games, I have to turn the exposure, like, way up. And I know they're like, that's not how you play it. I can't see. Yeah. This one does a nice job because they were smart about how they filmed the darkness.
Exactly. And that's the thing with... And that I mean, that's specifically where he pulled from the game, is like, he used darkness in a overbearing but not... what's the movie? It has Sharon Sossamon in it. Catacombs, I think it's what it's called, where, like, it's beautiful in its own right because most of the movie is lit by, like, a flashlight.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I'm glad he didn't go that direction, as that is how the Silent Hill games play, is
in
the dark with a flashlight.
But it is interesting that from the get-go he chooses to preset our tone for darkness here. He goes ahead, we're in the real world, we're in normal mindset, which for Silent Hill, rare instance, but we've already started at night, we've started with the suspicions of spooky, and we've started incorporating not white light, but red light.
Okay.
So firelight, candlelight, weird burning orange cross in the background, all orange light as opposed to a white or blue light.
Okay. See,
So like a flashlight, white light.
Okay.
But we didn't go that way.
I read the, how my stupid eyes read the, light it was white to me.
Yeah, I mean, which is fair, but
Yeah.
it is a very subtle change that he plays throughout this movie, which I like a lot.
Okay. I'm glad we have someone who can actually see colors properly for this review. And so, from this dark scene, we get a little bit of a jarring cut to a sunny meadow as the mother brings up that we are going to Silent Hill and that the child has no clue what this is about.
Yeah, okay. I know that this is based off of the video game.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a bad parenting life choice. This is... My child sleepwalks into oblivion, screaming bloody murder Silent Hill. We should go there.
Yes, this is an instance of stupid horror logic.
This movie is not safe from stupid horror.
No, it's not. And I think that's part of what makes it gold.
I think this is why people rewatch it.
Yes.
Because it has some infuriating moments like this one where you go, really?
It has...
We couldn't have at least talked to a professional first?
Here's why I appreciate it, too, because not only does it... and he does this throughout the movie with, like, his ties into, like, the video game world. Because this is, like, all the stupid logic in a video game of, like, oh, these puzzles. Why does this school have a tablet that has stone around the metal that you have to pour acid on that only melts the stone that's used to unlock the clock tower?
My favorite logic is, yes, this perfectly good screwdriver. I throw it away after the first use. Yeah, I appreciate that he, like, knows that this is a logic hole that he has to deal with. Like, I think one of the interviews he kind of reproaches it a little bit, and he's like, look, this is, we had a plot.
Yeah.
We had to go there.
You have to make the stupid decisions to get the movie going.
We really do.
Yeah. And so there is a continuation of the little hints at religion, too. Because as they're leaving the meadow side, which they just park the car off the side of the road, and... I mean,
I've driven with kids before, but, like, it's never to be like, honey, do you know where we're going? It's be like, if y'all don't shut up, we will be returning home.
We're gonna take a break, and you're gonna take a nap next to this picturesque tree.
No, it's usually like, if you get out and pee your pants right now, I will laugh at you and we will drive home.
Yes. And so from this, there's a sign in there that actually, I just saw it as kind of like, okay, there's a lot of religion stuff mixed into this, but
sure.
In this go around, this is kind of where I started doing a little bit more digging into this stuff and reanalyzing it. So there's a quote that it has: "Do you not know that we will judge angels? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world?" Corinthians 6:2-3, which does pay off later, and actually works out. So I'll get into that way later on to the movie. But this is a big part in, like, my current analysis of the movie.
Okay.
And from this, it's revealed that the mother has run away, but she's left a breadcrumb trail to lead the father to Silent Hill, West Virginia, which...
Okay. Can we talk about the father character now?
A little bit, yes.
Can I bitch about him yet?
We can not. Before we bitch about him, this is another stupid movie moment because of course she left her browsing history open. This is
yes.
To be fair, this is early 2000s, or mid 2000s. So like,
also like
delete your browsing history really,
yeah, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
like if you need a nice walk down memory lane, that era of Google is featured prominently. They didn't even like make up a fake website to use. It's just straight up old Google.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks crunchy.
But I mean I
can hear that click from over here.
That is the very poorly designed interfaces of the 90s. The utilitarian interfaces, not the sleek Windows 10 bullshit we got now.
Everything was solid gray.
Consoles were gray.
The website was gray.
Yes.
The buttons on the website were also gray.
It was a different time.
It was a different time. And I appreciate that the father character, I like that he did what he could with the father character. I'll give him that. Because at least he acts somewhat as a small voice of reason.
Yeah.
Going on being like, this is dumb. Why wouldn't we go get help? We should call someone. Why wouldn't we talk about this? But at the same time, because he voices what the audience already is like, well, the movie's telling me to ignore that.
Yeah.
Because he voices it, you're like, yeah, why aren't we doing those things?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I get that he had to be in the movie. I get that his character was required. Blah, blah, blah. But...
Well, so, I know from the people I know who loved the game first, their biggest bitch about the movie is the gender swap.
Oh, see, I was the opposite.
I am too. For the themes of the movie, it makes much more sense and it's more cohesive. Because in the game, because I did try starting to play through the game again, and I just don't have time to at this point in my life. But it was, the games are very vague and...
Yeah, they're honestly, they're a little clunky to play.
Oh yeah, it's old tank mechanics.
The mechanics are hard, the clues are subtle as hell. Like, it's a lot to try and play these games. I will say, I had friends who do not like the movie because they played the games first. So I have heard their argument before of like, well, the main character was a dude, and there's a dude in the movie. I've heard that.
Yeah.
I honestly, playing through the games, and then like revisiting people playing the games recently for this, the main character is just a self-insert.
Yeah.
Like, he could have been a walking mannequin, and I wouldn't have cared.
He has no personality in the game.
He has no personality. He has barely any useful dialogue other than, like, my child is missing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, cool. Like, if this had been a purple alien with no genitals whatsoever, story would not have changed.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I have friends who were very, like, up in arms that this got very close to being an all-female movie.
Well, that was actually the director's original idea, was to make it like a full female movie.
And like, to be honest with you, until I got to the part in my research where the director was like, oh yeah, the reason the dad character is awkward is because like I was required to put him in there.
Yeah. And
I was this close to having this feminist all-female movie. As a lady, I did not read this as a feminist movie that happened to have a man thrown in it.
And
I read it as the exact same. Main character could have been anything to me.
Yeah.
She is just a void. The cop, also a void.
The
little girl is the only one I care about.
Yes. And because I went into this from the beginning having that feminist ideal of gender roles in horror films.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to pick up on that. I'll get
sure.
that. I will get into very later into the movie.
I will give you that, but from a basic level watching of this movie,
yes,
this movie does not read the way the director thought it did.
I did not pick up on that until college because, to be
I think
honest,
most people didn't.
This is the first movie that I showed to friends, and there was one specific scene where I realized my showing people way too extreme stuff has been going on for a decade now, so...
Sure. But I will say, this is the first inkling of, like, as a standard viewer, you're gonna watch this and you go, wow, that was just bad writing.
Mm-hmm.
And the director, unfortunately, wanted you to see all of his symbolism.
Yeah.
That you are going to miss.
Oh, yeah.
Completely.
Well, I think that's what's great about this movie. But
I agree. I think that's why it has a weird cult following.
Yeah, so is that your bitching about the
No, I will bitch.
So far?
I will bitch more about the father later, because now that I have bitched that he is in this movie, I will bitch later about him as a character.
Okay, good. So do you want to know what my comments on this part of the movie was?
Yes.
I fucking hate their house.
I do too.
It is so bad. It is such awful architecture.
Okay, I have bitched enough about furniture as someone who studied furniture, that I now expect you to be able to look at that furniture, because these are 3 of the biggest pieces of furniture ever created, featured in their home.
Okay, I only picked up on one of them, and it was at the end.
Okay. There is a handful of very high-end furniture, which we are led to believe is not replica furniture, but original pieces, because he's waving money around.
Yeah.
This man is so fucking rich. This is stupid. No child lives in this house.
This is a couple who
sends their child to boarding school level rich.
Yeah, I've just realized, like, how serendipitous my life has been for, like, the past month. Because I keep, like, watching movies, and then shit happens in real life. Or shit happens in real life, and then I watch a movie around the same theme. Because, like, yesterday I watched a movie about adoption that also had a woman giving birth, and then our friend, I had this scheduled, like, a week ago, and then our friend gives birth. So, like...
Yeah. I mean, her due date has been on the list for 9 months.
It has been on the list, but it was just serendipitous of, like, this is when I scheduled this stuff, this is when it actually happens, kind of.
Like, when the schedule actually lines up and you didn't think about it.
Yeah, weird synchronicities. And it's been happening for, like, a month on just random weird shit.
Maybe you should just start watching movies about, like, random architects becoming famous and, like, wealthy. Just start putting that energy out into the universe.
Maybe. My other comment about this scene is that I like the sun setting. It's a nice way to, like, lead into the twilight and the horrors to come, because we start off at night, then we go to day, and now we're at the twilight.
I completely agree. And while I hate this house, it lends itself to this twilight moment perfectly. The amount of shiny reflective materials, the amount of white and beige used, the amount of silvers used, all enhance that sunset beautifully. It is an unrealistic, ugly house.
I just want to pour ketchup all over their furniture.
I mean, it'd come off because it's leather.
What stains leather?
Squid
ink. Squid ink.
I know from experience that leather dye terribly stains leather if you put it on wrong.
Shocking.
Sorry, Mom.
Leather dye. Dyeing leather.
I did it wrong. My bad. Sorry, Mom.
And so, at the gas station, the mother finds weird pictures in the sketchbook that once were cute little pictures have been turned into horrible.
They are meant to be spooky scary.
This is another synchronicity of my life, because that was part of the plot of last night's movie for 31 Days of Halloween. Was the kid was an artist and drew, like, kind of spooky, creepy pictures.
Okay, as someone who has watched many a child and was, some of whom were spooky, creepy children, and who was a spooky, creepy child myself, I apologize to my family. This isn't a sign of demon possession.
No.
Your kid's just weird, man.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
And she has the audacity to doodle over these drawings.
But what makes it weird is the girl does start freaking out, like, heavily that she...
Yeah, her mom fucking ruined her drawings.
The mom didn't do it.
No.
No.
According, in this girl's head, the only person who has found her notebook doodled in it.
No, she's asking who did it.
Yeah, it's the same ask as when your mom already knows that you ate all the cake.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah.
The kid knows she did it.
Yeah.
Kind of. And in this, she's confronted by a bike cop.
I have mixed feelings about this bike cop.
I get her purpose.
I do too.
She is from the game.
I agree, and having played the games first, the first time I watched this, I loved her. I was like, yes, she's here. Oh, she's even more kick-ass looking than I thought she was going to be. Watching it many years later, she's dumb. She's
video game dumb.
They found someone who looks too much like the video game character, in my opinion.
Yeah, just a bit. But I will get into her symbolism and why she is important to the themes of this movie.
She definitely is. She definitely is. She's just now creepy.
Yeah. Kind of. Because as she goes, Rose, the mom, goes in to pay the bills, she finds out that her card's been declined as the cop is just like, looking in her window. You good, little girl? Mommy told me not to talk to strangers.
Your mother was right.
Good girl.
Yeah.
But we also learned that the father is kind of the voice of reason, because He wants to put her in a hospital.
Which, I mean, if your kid's walking around seeing demons and shit, might be time.
But that's just sleepwalking. I mean, I slept walk.
True.
I probably still do, but...
I mean, this movie tries really hard to use spooky things to be like, look at the demon-possessed child. Yeah. When in reality, this is a normal kid who sleepwalks and is spooky.
Yeah, it tries...
It tries to pre-plant the pre-anticipated fear that you go into playing a horror game. You put that CD in the PlayStation and you're like, okay, this game's scary. Scare me, game.
Yeah.
And this movie has to somehow create that. Because,
so here's my thoughts on that, is that Silent Hill is heavily towing that line between it being a horror film for a non-video game audience.
Yeah.
And that's this moment right here, because it's doing this very stereotypical horror tropes.
It is.
Without just planting us right in Silent Hill right away, because we got to have build up in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, enough, because also this was the gaming era where you were expected to read the little card thing that came in the...
Yeah, the manuals.
Yeah, the manual wasn't just like how to start and stop the game. It like had lore.
There was no tutorials back then.
No, and there was no there's barely background information in the game. You were expected to read that shit in like a magazine or in the game manual.
Yeah, I think probably the most at the time, what I was playing at the time, Spyro was the most advanced narrative because it actually had dialogue explaining stuff.
And even that was weak.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, dragons have been turned to crystals. Go save them, Spyro. Nasty Nork is nasty.
And you're like, got it. Roger. And they still put more in the manual.
Yeah, exactly. Which
is good, because, otherwise, who are these creatures and why do I care about them? But, I get that the movie had a lot to, try to make up for, because we would be missing all of this otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And so, from this, we get a nice transition through a gorgeous night shot over the mountains. This
looks so good.
Beautiful.
Very well done.
And in this moment, Rose is pulled over by the cop, but she spies a sign for Silent Hill and decides to book it. But
an interesting choice.
Ultimately crashes the car while trying to fix the radio, and it's going haywire as she's speeding down the road on mountain roads, and a girl walks onto the road.
Which, again, trying to be spooky scary feels like just a dumb move. But I get it, and I will accept it.
Yeah, because this is the part where the video game starts.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so Rose wakes up to a ash falling from the sky world, and Sharon is missing, and we have finally arrived at Silent Hill.
Yes. And the ash that they managed to produce for this movie throughout the whole thing is some of the best looking I have seen in a long time.
Yep.
It perfectly toes the line between snow and ash, where at first, especially before she does the thing where she rubs it and is like, oh, ash.
Yeah.
Before that, you're like, wow, weird color tint choice for the snow? Question mark?
Kind of.
And then as it's explained, you're like, I'm glad we didn't go with straight, gray chunks falling from the sky. This is it's very light. It feels like that first, little bit of snow, so it feels cold, even though it's not. I love it. Looks so good.
It feels like fresh ash.
It does.
It's not the ash that's been sitting around a while. It's the one that just came out of the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice catch. I'd never really thought about that.
The only reason I noticed it is because several of the interviews had talked about some of the hazards of making this film. Fire being topmost.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things set on fire for this movie that some people weren't super comfortable with. A lot of candles in small spaces.
Yeah.
That people were like, I feel like this is a hazard to my health. And so the fact that a lot of this ash ended up being CGI really impressed me. Because getting things to float around and not look layered on top of stuff, especially in 2006, a little bit difficult. And then for it to age well, really impressive.
I'll get into my thoughts on the CGI in a bit.
I agree. Some of the CGI did not. The ash falling still looks great.
Yeah, no, the environment stuff is fantastic for the most part.
I agree.
Yeah. And so with this, they actually did a really good job of like capturing that old town Murica feel.
It really did. It looks good.
Yeah, which Gaines mentioned that he knew like this had to be set in America because this is, despite being made by a Japanese company, a very American-esque movie.
I mean, you can't reach this level of stupid parenting any other way.
Yeah, kind of. But like just the overall aesthetics of the game and like the religion feels very much new age spiritualism kind of stuff.
And like the whole game in general, without being heavy-handed, did have an underlying Americana vibe, which it's his movie, he could have put it anywhere, but it wouldn't have been quite the same. Yeah. It would have been missing that little like toe of like small hodunk town.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so while Rose is running down the streets at random,
she's going for it.
She sees Sharon in the distance and runs towards her down an old alley.
Yep.
And I think this is shot perfectly because
I agree.
This is where he starts like adding in like the feel of the game where like this is our first non-standard camera angle and it mimics the game and shows it begins keying in the unexposed audience into the fact that something is a little bit off.
I agree.
It's very much I was on Laugh's chat on his stream the other day. There was something we were watching or he was playing and it did a Dutch angle, the one where it's just slightly off center. And it was just like one of those moments where it's right. Yeah, it's where he starts towing it in, leaving the little breadcrumb trails. And from this, Rose ascends down these creepy stairs as the siren starts to wail in the background, and the angle shifts some more. Uh-huh. I do like the little subtle nods he's still giving along this, as well as we see a snippet of decay in the background, but it's so quick that it's not really seen. But it goes right into a dark alley with everything already changed.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's leaving the suspense of what's going on in this, because the first time viewer, you just went from a town covered in ash to
hell.
Yeah. And so Rose then chases after the girl in the blue dress and runs into a tied up miner as a distorted childlike creature appears behind her.
Yeah, and this unfortunately is the scene that like the movie dates a little awkwardly here.
Starts to, yes.
Because the guy tied up still looks good. Mm-hmm. Like, the detail on him looks really good. He's scary. He's gruesome. It looks painful. Oh, shit. And then the creature behind him, especially if you're a Silent Hill fan, you're like, aha, a theme. I like the theme.
Yeah.
Good theming. However, and in 2006, I remember it looking pretty good. Mm-hmm. But the detail on that creature, because you're reading it as the, like, Silent Hill creatures, which were very blurry and a little hard to see.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it kind of almost dances around the point that you want, because we've got a very good, very detailed, very scary, love it. Mm-hmm. Feels like something that would have been in one of those flash-up scenes.
Yeah.
And then we've got this guy who's clearly meant to be the thing walking around with you in the game, and he's too far.
It's a little cartoonish.
It is.
Just slightly.
But I'm okay with him because he doesn't show up anywhere else.
No. And I'll get into like why some of this actually still holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
I do want to, this is where I want to start talking about the creatures.
Okay.
So this creature specifically is present in the game. It's called the Grey Children or Demon Children, and is used to most likely represent a set of children later on in the movie.
Okay.
But before we get too far into the monsters, I do want to mention that some of the same technicians and people who worked on Silent Hill also worked on Guillermo del Toro's Mimic.
Yep.
And he specifically wanted them from Mimic to work on this.
Yes, he did.
As well, this almost, and here's the thing, we're going to come across a common theme with all these creatures, is that the humanoid creatures are portrayed by dance and theater people, as The Grey Children is based off a woman in a suit, a dancer named Yvonne Ing. Her last name is Ingi, and I don't know how to pronounce that.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think this is quite reflective of Gaines' inspiration stemming from, he brought his ideals from surrealist and modern art.
Yes.
And he wanted the creatures to be disturbing while not overly disgusting.
Yes, which I think he succeeded in.
Exactly. And he wanted them to feel like living dolls or beings of flesh and plastic.
And I think he succeeded on the other monsters.
Yes.
I think these first ones are close, but I think his later ones, which are the ones everyone remembers from this movie anyway, very successful.
Yes. But I do want to bring up, these are very symbolic, and I'll get into a lot of the creature symbology way later into this movie, because I spent way too much time on figuring some of this out, because it doesn't, and that's the thing, is like, these creatures don't really pay off the first time you see them on screen. It all pays off towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
As well, I do want to mention that there's an interview with the practical effects artist Paul Jones in the DVD set that's actually pretty good. He did all the makeup for the creature, so he didn't do the suits, but he did like all the touch-up makeup and making them look pretty for film. But he does have an impressive track record, because he worked on Hellraiser 2,
Hell yeah,
Nightbreed, Hellraiser 3, Wishmaster Blade, Bride of Chucky. Specifically, he was very proud of the dude with the nails in his head.
I know which one. Yes.
And Ginger Snaps.
Okay. A good track record.
Yeah, he has a great record as a special effects dude. And this is the guy I wanted to bring up, because he actually operated on a loss for this movie, but he loved working on the film so much that he didn't give a shit.
I mean, good for him.
Yeah.
Do what you will have.
Also, he is the dude in the mask with the close-up of the miner.
Aw, good for him, getting to be in the movie.
So he got a little bit of a cameo.
Yay!
And so, from this, Rose runs, but she is almost overcome, and only escapes because the creatures disintegrate as she passes out.
Yes. I will say, there's not a lot of... this movie does a nice job of skirting around a lot of the dumb horror tropes. Rose gets stuck behind chain link fences just a handful too many times.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but...
And by stuck, I mean, like, I am fine with those being barriers and her not being able to get around them. But what I mean is, the director was trying to invoke the feeling in the game where you've gone the wrong way and you're stuck in a dead end with the creatures coming at you.
Yeah.
Which I get from a video game. Like, I played the video games first. When I saw that, I was like, yes, that's the feeling.
Yeah.
But if you go into this without the video game knowledge, it just feels like Rose is dumb. Because the chain links don't feel like that barrier that they
don't feel like a labyrinth thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I get where he's coming from, and I can see where his vision is and why he thinks it works in his head. But from a non-video game person, and I think there's only 2 or 3 scenes where this happens with her, like, he normally, the rest of the movie, he uses real, like, walls, real buildings, and those work, because you know what that feels like in your head. The chain link fences, most of us are capable of going over.
To be fair, the ones in this one are, like, 10 feet high, so
she could have tried, my man.
Could have tried, but I mean, it's also panicking. But
yes,
I do want to say, her not getting got by these creatures not only furthers the plot, but from someone who has played at least through up to this point in the game, you die in the game, and then you wake up, and so it's like it's a different type of transition. But because later, her symbology later on in the movie explains why she keeps falling into these situations and doesn't get got.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, she wakes up in a bowling alley as the only non-Silent Hill song plays, Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash.
A good song.
Fantastic song. I mean, it's fitting. Like
it is. It is.
It works.
I think I understand his desire to use the music from the video game. Because, like we said, this man came at this with a deep love of the video game. However, I think the song Ring of Fire sets the tone better for a non-video game watcher.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone knows Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire, and we all know what level of like hell that's supposed to
Yeah,
evoke.
it's basically saying she's in hell at this point.
Which without that song,
Yeah.
my dear husband unfortunately had to watch this movie for the first time without the music because we had. I was listening to commentary while we were watching it and listening to interviews and stuff. So I had the volume way down, and also we were trying to be quiet for sleeping roommates, and so the poor man did not get to listen to any of the sound or music or dialogue. And so he had a lot of questions on where she was.
Okay.
And so without this song, I really do think the audience in general would not have gotten the concept of hell quite as quickly.
Yeah, and I forget that outside of you and I, your husband's not a horror fan, so like...
Not strongly, and like Silent Hill isn't his type of video game.
No.
So he's never played the video games. He, I think, has watched like a little bit of them, but to be honest, unless you like grew up with them, they're kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like, the later ones, I would argue, are a little bit more fun for, like, a first-timer, but, like, by then the story's already established.
Yeah.
So, like, he missed the Silent Hill boat altogether, unfortunately. And it was interesting to see, like, how someone who's not into the video games and wasn't given any, like verbal clues, how well he recognized the visual symbolism in this.
Yeah, I get that. And... I mean, he'll be fine. He'll
rewatch it and he will enjoy it much more.
I'm going to be introducing him to so many horror musicals, and next week I am saving Happiness of the Katakuris for him.
Of course.
He is going to absolutely hate that movie, and I'm going to be so happy about it. So, from this, not Ash...
Go Pokemon.
Yes, totally. And the world will turn to ash. Because what I was going to say is Rose is back. She leaves the bowling alley and realizes that she's in a set of alleyways behind some stores that is back in the normal Ashy world.
Yes.
That's why I said Ash, because
There
I was
we
reading
go.
the outline. And so Rose now finds that she's still stumbling around town with no guide. She finds that the roads are broken into voids, and this is where she meets Dahlia.
Yes.
Who cryptically lets out that only the Dark One lets you in and out of Silent Hill.
Spooky.
This is where the movie, like, for a non-video game fan or someone who knows what has a little understanding of what's going on, I can understand, like, where this doesn't work because...
She's a little goofy.
And there's also just a lot of cryptic shit that doesn't really add anything unless you're doing, like, the deep dive you and I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
But with all that said, I love her.
Oh, I do too.
I love her. She's the classic kooky spooky witch.
Yeah.
Of like, the village witch. Ooh, and like...
Spooky!
And honestly, like, if you're going into this movie, like I think most people did, with limited knowledge of the video games or no knowledge, yeah, she feels a little weird, but honestly, like, not as weird as the weird demon children we just met, so, like, why the fuck not?
Yeah, it's just a gray old woman.
Yeah, another witchy lady. Go for it.
Yeah.
She's fine.
Yeah. And so, in this part, Gaines also begins using the idea of camera angles going through buildings as well as making adaptations to the game just to, like, show people that, hey, this is not your, like, this isn't a standard world we're in.
The movie section cut.
Yeah, exactly. I love those cuts.
It looks really good. And they did a nice job because they were smart about how they did these. There was a lot of physically moving the set along with the camera to make those spaces elongate.
Yeah.
Which ended up making it feel like a proper transition, as opposed to those ones where they make like a fake wall with the section cut in it so that you can like pan through the wall.
Yeah.
This works a lot better because we've got more time to go, and we're here.
Well, and also the cuts are more detailed because the cuts you're talking about, for those who aren't aware, like the section cuts feel like the standard architectural school section cut where it's a black line to indicate a wall.
Nice thick mystery void.
Yeah, which I've seen a lot of movies go more into like
the
actually showing like the details of like showing plumbing in the wall and stuff. And
which like I appreciate. And I think this movie, though, is in a weird spot of being able to use these section cuts because we are weirdly in a place where time and space don't matter. We already know that.
Yeah.
And also, we don't give a damn about the building and the building codes. They're all fairly generic, And, like, even the ones that are meant to be more symbolic, like later on the churches and things like that, they're still pretty basic, so I don't really care what's inside the wall. So, honestly, the fact that they put stuff in there at all makes me happy. There's no insulation, there's no battboard, there's barely pipes, but I don't care.
It's fine. It's enough to convey a wall section, because I know exactly how that goes, because I've been going on to, like, friends' streams and stuff, like, when they're playing new games, and I'm like, oh, that's a reference to that. That's a reference to that. Like, I was on Laffenstein's stream, and he's breaking all these I don't know if he finished it or not, because I went to bed. He's been playing the new Resident Evil game.
Oh, yes.
And part of the game set in a mansion. And it's all Rococo shit.
I love Rococo.
And so, like, I'm just sitting there, like,
person.
I'm like, dude, you realize, like, how expensive those vases are? Like, this.
Stop breaking them.
Because I was trying to figure out, like, where roughly in Europe it's taking place, because, like, the church is very much Scandinavian stave churches, so it's like northeast-ish kind of, but it's also got Rococo furniture and shit.
A little more France. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
like
showing their wealth and stuff, but it's like, I go into those rabbit holes and it's like, oh yeah, sorry guys, this is kind of my jam.
Yeah, and Silent Hill does a nice job where, like, we get a vague enough description, but even the detailed people like us, the wall section's a nice level, not too much.
No.
I'm not spending my time trying to figure out what the hell, because a real wall section is honestly a bit much for most people to look at.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Or there's literally nothing, and that's weird. Because you think there's supposed to be stuff in the walls.
Yeah, it's like the first time I really saw a CMU wall section where it's like,
really? That's it? This is all that's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, like, this is a nice level of, like, fake detail.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, most of the architecture in this has a nice layer of very fake, but nice detail.
Yeah, it has it's the same level of detail like Satoshi Kon went into on, like, a lot of his anime, where, like...
It really is.
Specifically Tokyo Godfathers with the back alleyways, which, check out that episode. We go on another architecture rant on that shit.
Such a good movie.
Yes. But back to Silent Hill. Rose is kind of confronted by this woman, or Dahlia, because she's trying to find her child, and she's like, oh, you're from here. Hey, have you seen this girl wandering around? And she's like, oh, she looks like Alessa. And, like, tries to grab the pendant and freaks out, which it ends up Rose running away and panicky. I mean,
standard horror stuff.
But it leads to one of my favorite lines in this film.
What was yours?
Into the fire, she swallowed their hate.
That is a good line.
It is a really fucking good line.
And I think part of the reason why that line, like, is another level is because it feels scriptural, even though it's not.
Yeah.
And this movie spends a lot of effort trying to subconsciously remind you about, like, cult level Christianity.
Yes.
Not like normal Christianity, not even like super Christianity, like that next level, like, okay, we've gone too far, Children of the Corn level crap.
Yeah, which, serendipity-wise, I'm almost finally caught up on last podcast on the left. I'm on their most recent episode.
Nice.
About the guy who pretty much started the satanic panic of the 80s and the 90s.
My favorite topic.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, so I am at that point. I keep talking about these serendipities, like it's getting obnoxious.
And I have found an entire new plot hole in YouTube to watch the last few months about cult religions in America.
Oh yeah.
Very entertaining. Very interesting. Lot of questions.
Yeah.
A lot of tax loopholes.
Yeah.
A lot of like one dude being rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of them. Yeah. A lot of the male-led ones.
Definitely.
Actually, almost all of them now.
Which surprisingly lend themselves very heavily to Silent Hill, which I do wonder if, like, a more modern watcher would like Silent Hill better than a 2006 watcher.
Yeah.
Because we've had such a rise in not just, like, the true crime, but we've reached a point in the true crime world where we've moved on to, like, you didn't technically do anything wrong, but, like, you're a cult, my man.
Yeah, like, Charles Manson technically didn't kill anyone. And I am under very much the idea that Charles Manson probably said something fucking stupid, and Tex Watson just interpreted wrong and fucking murdered all those people.
But at the same time, he definitely didn't tell them not to do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those loopholes where I think people now would probably like the original Silent Hill so much better than 2006, when, like, stranger danger, and we spend a lot of the time of this movie being like, why is the cop being creepy? Is she a fake cop? Fake cops are bad.
No, exactly. That's what I was thinking too of, like, because, like, that's what serial killers did.
Yeah.
They pretended to be cops, or they wanted to be cops.
And, like, I know the movie spends all of this time being like, no, she's a real cop and she's a good cop. Boy, does she not look like one of the fake cops we got told about all the time in the early 2000s.
Yes, exactly.
So, like, I think maybe a more modern audience would really get the symbolism in this a little better than the original.
Probably, especially since the 2006 watching.
Oh, yeah.
So, and from this, we get cut to the real world where the father is trying to track them down. He's found the gas station, and this is where he flashes his cash.
And I mean, it's a lot of money for 2006, I guess.
I didn't pay attention to how
It's
much
like a
money he
couple hundred.
flashed.
He's got 100 on the outside of the clip.
Oh.
And it's not a thick clip. It's like, I mean, it's not a thin clip, but it's not like a, oh, bump, I do drugs, son, level clip. It's like a, I got 100 and, like, I got like $200 and some change.
It's not Breaking Bad, those two guys just
It's not Grand Theft
chilling on
Auto.
top. Yeah.
It's not Grand Theft Auto level money, but it's more money than I carry.
I think more money than most people carry nowadays.
Probably.
Yeah.
I do love that he spends this time trying to bribe the, like, gas station attendant / mechanic, because, like, I think that guy probably would have told him anyway.
Yeah.
He's not trying too hard to be like, ooh, what? Where?
Like, all right, I'll take your money if you're going to give it to me. I was going to tell you, but
Dumbass.
all right. Yeah.
But, I mean, that is that entire character. So.
Yeah, there is a weird, like, early 2000s nostalgia to this movie.
Yes, but it only happens around the father figure.
And I will say one
and
part.
maybe some of the cop.
The cop and a scene that's just about to come up, the phone.
I forgot about the phone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because it's video game phone logic, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It feels like a walkie-talkie now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I forgot about the phone.
And so from this, we cut back to Silent Hill, where Rose has returned to her car to find the sketchbook with the pictures to guide her. Now she's found the hints, which takes place in the alley in the game. But
I mean, like, there's a handful of scenes that really reminds you, like, this is a video game adaptation, and this feels like one of them. But this scene, you don't care too much, because you're like, come on, let's go.
Yeah, let's keep going with the plot. We've been in this area. This is like half the movie, guys.
Yeah, we've already been to this location. Come on.
Yeah. And so, in this moment, she tries calling home, and tries to start the car, but is arrested by the cop, which I hate her, like, arresting dialogue. It just feels so monotone.
She forgot to finish reading her the Miranda rights.
Yeah.
Like, are you even a real cop?
It's fine.
I mean, it's fine because later on, and, like, because of the movie that she is in and the character she's trying to portray, I will say, though, that this is, I think it's here, or maybe just, like, a few scenes later, where she finally takes off, like, her, oh no, it's coming up.
It's coming up. It's coming up in a moment.
And then I have a new bitch about the cop.
Okay. Yeah, so from this, we cut back to the real world where the hubby gets the call, but it's gargled, and he meets a roadblock. Yeah, he gets a roadblock with the police that they tell him that the car's been found, but they can't find the occupants.
His entire side quest feels like a British TV drama.
Yeah.
Which has, like, no business being in this movie.
Oh, we did forget to talk about, like, who actually plays these people. Sean Bean's the father, and, what's her name? Rhoda Mitchell.
Yeah.
Is from, we talked about her earlier. She's the, You're Welcome 13-year-old boys in,
yes, she is.
Pitch Black.
Yes, she is.
I completely forgot to mention that's why we had our drink.
Yes, and also, like, I understand that her husband has a name. It's Sean Bean. Her husband is just Sean Bean.
I do have it written further on in this.
It's
in
Christopher,
outline.
I think. But, like, I also keep calling him Christoph because I think that was one of, like, the art directors or something in this. So, like, it's Sean Bean. The husband is just Sean Bean.
Sean Bean is Sean Bean. Whatever role he is in, he is Sean Bean.
Unless he's Boromir, then he's Boromir.
He's still Sean Bean as Boromir.
I thought I saw him as Boromir first, so it's just Boromir in all of these movies.
Same here. Same here. And so, we cut back to Silent Hill, where Rose and Sybil, who is the cop,
Yes.
Find another blocked road, and we meet our next creature.
Which, I like this creature.
Yes.
This is a good creature.
This creature is creatively called the Armless Man.
He is, in fact, armless.
And is based on the lying figure from the second game, and is portrayed by another dancer, Michael Koda, who, for his audition, had his arms tied behind his back and had to walk in a distorted manner.
And I think this one holds the Silent Hill, like, horror just a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's quite the peak yet, because we all know who the peak monster is in this movie.
Yeah.
But, like, this one is a good level of horror for me, because, A, movement, weird as hell. The no arm thing, good. Mm-hmm. And we get a hint of what it can do, like, video game-wise, while it still maintains the movie world.
Exactly. And this one is where, like, some of the practical effects really hit hard.
They look really
and
good.
really still hold up.
Definitely.
But symbolism-wise, I'm going to jump the gun a little bit, because this is the only time we see this creature in the movie.
Yes, it is.
It most likely represents hospitalization, whether it's a future character's experience in the hospital, or the current iteration's fear of the potential hospital, potentially hearing her parents over talk about sending her to an asylum, because they've talked about it in their house before she calls the husband.
Sure, I definitely read this as an acid reflex, like just the feeling of it in general.
No, Silent Hill
not heartburn. This isn't heartburn the creature.
No, it isn't.
Because boy, it sure feels like it.
No, it is. It is not that.
I don't know. It feels like me after a lot of drinks. Just crawl into the bathroom, puking up acid.
I wish it was that simple. And so, my little complaints about this, rewatching it again. One, how did these acid not... Because this creature shoots acid from its chest.
Yes.
How did it not actually, like, corrode the police officer? Well, sorry, real quick. The acid, for me, also, in a lot of things in this movie... symbolizes the corruption and furthering of the hatred as it destroys the world around them.
An interesting take, because I think we went in with these at slightly different angles.
I know we went into these at completely different angles. Okay,
let me rephrase that. Not just from, like, the research and how we were looking at them symbolically, but I think you went in with a different base level of Christian understanding than I did.
Okay.
So the Christian symbology for me might have hit a little differently than yours.
What is the Christian symbology in this one?
Okay, so acid, while not like a hard-hitting, like go fast and hard, every Christian knows this, most of that gets interpreted as pits of hell.
Okay.
Or the corrosion and eating away of sin. So, like, the feeling of acid reflux, that's, like, sin to you.
Yeah.
So, like, this would be, like, a projection of sin.
Yeah, no, it
works both ways, but, like, in a different roundabout.
We're talking about it in the exact same terminology. Like,
yes.
Or same idea, I'm just using different terminology. Because that's what I mean by the corruption. And I'll get into that way... I'm setting a story for later down the line and what my ideas on the themes.
Okay.
But speaking of the acid, how the hell did it not get on her face? Because that helmet is not protecting her face at all.
I also have questions. I also have questions about the jacket that she's like, oh, it's burning my jacket, but nowhere else. And now my biggest complaint with the cop.
Yeah,
as someone with terrible face blindness, she is just the main character, but skinnier. She has blonde hair. I assume blue eyes. Didn't really look.
I didn't look.
Very Caucasian. One is just slightly taller and thinner than the other. Slightly shorter hair.
Shorter hair. Different proportions. She has a very, I was looking elsewhere, let's just say that.
I will agree with you. However, we spend most of our time running around.
Yeah.
And, like, I get it, like, video game logic and also, like, basic symbology of Christianity. We're gonna pick blonde hair, blue-eyed women. Because, like, Mother Mary probably had blonde hair, but she definitely didn't.
No.
Like, bullshit.
Yeah.
But, like, the whole, like, blonde hair, so holy, so angel-esque. Nonsense.
I did not read any of that.
It's one of those things where, like, I got there because of the amount of time the director spent talking about having to find the perfect person to portray all of these characters.
Yeah.
And the wording and choices that he used was very indicative to me of a dude looking for a specific look in women that women don't actually recognize in themselves.
I completely understand that, because I still see that scene as the same way I did when I was in high school, because her police outfit is very flattening, and she has a lot of va-va-voom.
Did you ever watch Hellsing the anime? She is just police titty girl.
I have not seen the anime, but I've seen the abridged one, big titty police one. That's like one of the first things you ever showed me.
You're welcome. Best anime ever. Yeah, she's just big titty police girl. But with slightly different hair. And not that much different.
You're not wrong.
It's just Sarah's Victoria.
She is a very generic policewoman.
She's just Sarah's Victoria.
Okay, I don't know who that is. I'm assuming
big titty police
okay,
woman.
That's who I assumed it was. All right. And so, in this moment, Sybil looks up the hill and sees more creatures coming as Rose decides to make a break for it and finds Midwich Elementary School.
I like the pause in time that the effort went into this elementary school. Mm-hmm. Because the set feels right on for the point-and-click adventure, but also he went out of his way to include architectural details from the 70s that most schools very quickly got rid of.
Yes, this is a very old school style brick school that feels very religious.
And it feels like one of those ones that was built in the 40s or 50s, and the most the school did to update was throw a new slab of paint on everything, didn't even scrape off the old one.
Nope.
Which fits so perfectly, but it's such a small detail that most of the time in these sets directing completely gets lost. Yeah. Completely overlooked, completely lost. Like the bathroom detail coming up. Perfect.
It makes me think of, we were at an ambassador's school in Rome for soccer. Because like when we would travel, we'd spend the night at these schools.
Fun.
And so like it reminds me of their bathrooms.
They are also very heavy in the, we haven't updated since 1824.
Yeah, exactly. And so one thing I do want to point out is above the entranceway to the school, there is a saying that says, "The foes of the righteous will be condemned."
Yes.
Written on the school entranceway. And that,
like I said, Hodunk, small town, Jesus.
Yes, and to further themes that I will talk about later.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, in the school, Rose finds a flashlight and shines it on some posters of country, home, loyalty, and God, all with remnants of Gaines' desire to have an all-female film. All the women in all the posters have a central female figure. Yes,
and they are also very interesting choices for the Christian symbology, which is something again, this is one of those symbology things that you're going to read. We're going to end up at the same point.
Yeah.
But you're going to have gotten there differently. So you got there based off of the front door quote. That didn't raise red flags for me, because as someone who went to a small Christian church school, that's normal. The posters having all female leads who are not Mary is a red flag to me.
I got there a different route from that. So that religion was that text was in my rewatching of it. The posters was actually from my first analysis of Silent Hill and the flipping of the gender roles. And I promise this flipping of gender roles will work itself out in what I'm going to talk about way later on in this episode.
Yes. The choice to use images that are clearly aged, purposefully picked to be, however you want to put it, propaganda.
Yeah,
like
they feel
posters.
Like we can do it kind of posters.
Yes. The difference is these are images that this small town would have recognized. Those would have been people that they would have studied about. They would have had all the knowledge, but you don't.
Yep.
And as someone who grew up with what would have been considered a very solid understanding of all of that symbolism, not knowing who those are raises red flags.
Okay.
Like, were they saints? Probably not. I don't recognize all of them as saints. So we've moved out of the Catholic realm.
Okay.
Because some of them are too modern.
Okay.
But some of them could have been. So we're still pulling off of that. So those are the weird red flags running around here still, where it's like, okay, I know we've got Christian symbolism going on. We've already talked about the churches. We've already seen crosses. Now we're twisting it.
Yes.
Because before that, while yes, we were heavy-handed on the Christian symbolism, it all still fit.
Yeah, because that was in the real world. Now we're in the perversion that is Silent Hill.
Exactly.
Yep. And so, back in the real world, the men are now in the decrepit town that we can kind of recognize that there's some stores that look similar.
It's weird because I know from listening to the director that this was supposed to have been the, like, a parallel. Mm-hmm. Parallel universe, parallel reality, however you want to interpret. The first time I watched this, didn't recognize this as parallels until we got to the lockers.
Ah.
And, like, the lockers are, like, the smack in the face, like, oh, they're supposed to be standing right next to each other. He can smell her perfume in the air. And by that point I went, oh!
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because we focus, he went really heavy-handed in the symbolism for, like, the 4 different levels of Silent Hill. Mm-hmm. My blind ass couldn't tell that they were the same place.
Okay.
I thought we were, like, physically in different locations.
Okay.
Not overlapping.
I can see that.
Once I knew that, once we got to the locker scene, I was good.
Okay.
I had the rest of the movie down. I was like, oh, okay, we're doing reality twist bullshit, but not like, oh, Silent Hill is... Because when I played the games, mm-hmm. I read it as, like, not overlapping realities.
Yeah.
I read it as, like, this town, which no one can come in or out of, but there's, like, a hole in the map, like Area 51 level.
Yeah, and I think that comes from when you're in actually Midwich in the game, because you go through this... Once you get into the clock tower, there's this passageway underneath that doesn't feel like it pops in and out back in the same spot.
Yeah.
It feels like it's tangential to it.
Sure.
Or like on another path to it. So like other plane.
Yeah. And like it works. But if you're not like a deep Silent Hill fan, mm-hmm. it's going to take a minute for you to be like, oh, we're on top of each other. Yeah. Sort of thing. Because the movie did lead you to be like, the long-lost city that no one talks about. Okay, yeah, I can see that.
One thing I do want to note that I picked up on this viewing is that the marquee lists the movies The Omega Man and The Last Man on Earth.
Which is fun symbolism.
Yes, nice little nods to the kind of role Sean Bean plays in the movie as the last man searching for the truth, but is spinning his wheels in the wrong direction.
I also feel like it's a nice nod to, like, the true ending of the movie, mm-hmm. where, like, we've got the last people sort of situation. Yep. Which, fun. Also nice that they didn't pick, like, more realistic movie names, because it's obviously a hint.
Well, those are realistic movie names, because for those who don't know, both those movies are based on the novel I Am Legend. And from one... And they actually kind of lead to, like, what the decay of when Silent Hill took place was sometime in the 70s, as The Omega Man was released in 1971, and The Last Man on Earth, a Vincent Price movie, was released in 1964.
I've heard of The Last Man on Earth. I haven't heard of Omega Man.
I know of Omega Man. I have never seen it, though, but they're the same source material, so I can see why you would...
Legend is a good source material.
Yeah, I can see why you would think... realistic movie names when they are actual movies.
I mean, good on him for picking ones that, A, symbolic as hell, but also, like, with the exception of, like, really deep divers, mm-hmm. probably haven't seen or watched them.
And I'm sure there's so much in the movies in the town that I did not pick up on, because there's so much. Things. I had to remove so much from the outline, because there's so much shit. So from this, we get back to the other Silent Hill, where Rose is drawn by clattering to turn around to see minors.
Spooky.
As she flees to a classroom where she finds a notebook, and she's given a vision of a child being harassed by a group of others.
And this harassment is very much meant to depict a standard stoning, like biblical stoning.
Yeah, very kind of picturesque because, for one, this is also our first instance of faux 35mm film.
Yes.
Gaines did want to use 35mm to shoot these, but he didn't have that chance. It's also kind of like his, he also wanted all these like backstories to be presented in kind of a lost film strategy, kind of in a way like Cannibal Holocaust did.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of like that. But like the way the books are all arcing in a very almost magical arc.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, these are really nice ways for him to tie together video game levels and like progression points.
Yep.
Because how do you explain that visually for an audience who's not playing a video game?
Yeah.
Like, you have to have some level of achievement and breadth and story, because otherwise we're just running for monsters.
Yeah, you have to have that little bit of reprieve from being attacked, on the run, and still kind of on the run, but you have to advance the story just that little bit further.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, from this, Rose spies the girl in a blue dress again at the top, and she runs up to the top of the school where she finds a bathroom where a man bent in half corpse is surrounded in barbed wire, just chilling in one of the stalls.
Yeah, like one does.
This, just a heads up, if you stuck with us this far, this is where it's going to get it's going to start getting dark, really, really dark from here. One, I do love how disgusting the bathroom is, and I love the childlike taunting on the walls. I dare you. I double dare you.
Yes.
Because Rose does reach into the mouth. And I will say, this is the part where, like, the cryptic nature of, like, the video game is actually done quite well.
Yes. And it doesn't feel, to an audience not video game related, like, oh, we're pandering to the video game people now.
Yeah.
This feels right for the horror film.
Yeah, it feels like she is being led this way by some divine force.
I will say, from just the movie standpoint, while it is not groundbreaking, a lot of people bitched about how dumb she is to put her hand in this mouth. I agree.
Yeah.
But video game logic says we must.
Yeah, it's the same logic of, like, you have to find these 4 gems to put in this statue to open up your police precinct's office.
Exactly.
And so, as Rose pulls a piece of stone from the mouth, she goes to leave, but the miners find her and start trying to kick in the door, which, what is that door made of?
Solid wood.
True, but they're also, they're dipshits, they're kicking and they're not, like, using their crowbars and shit.
No, they're just kicking the door.
Yeah, but they're stopped as their bird freaks out and sirens start going off.
Time to leave.
Because we know something's happening. We've been cued into what's happening before, because this is our first truly fully seeing of, like, the upper world of Silent Hill rotting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, it didn't age great.
No. That is exactly what I was going to say, is that...
Like, I get it, and if you squint, you're like, yes.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that we even bother to truly see it, because we could have made the movie choice to do the forever, like, odd transition where you nod to it like we did at the beginning, but don't truly show it. Yeah,
or you pan to the character's face and then pan back and everything's changed.
Yeah. Like, I applaud the bravery and the goal to try and do this.
Yeah.
And in 2006, I do remember it being, like, gross and drippy and scary. Unfortunately, in modern times, it just feels flat.
It falls under that. Unfortunately, because this was still one of the earlier movies that incorporated, like, full CGI scenes.
Yes,
and it was a much more budget movie than compared to, like, Star Wars.
I think the problem could have unfortunately been solved if she wasn't in frame, because she's too crisp.
Yeah, I get that, but for what it is, it's still not bad. It just hasn't aged horribly, or just hasn't aged greatly. Yeah,
it's not the worst, but just as a warning, like, the monsters all looked really good. You had your hopes really high, and then this transition hits.
Yeah,
and you're like, but we are redeemed because halfway bent in half man is gonna waddle his way out of the stall,
starts dragging himself out,
blah, 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 blah.
Scoot. begins spreading his filth.
He is very there's I think it's either an animal or a fungus, not sure which, that sends all of its insides out.
Oh, the thing, it's...
Is it a slug?
It's some type of flatworm. It's a thing that Pukumuku's based off of in Pokemon.
Yes.
There's other worms that do it too, but that's the one that comes to mind.
The worm that takes its entire digestive tract and puts it on the outside of its body, that's what he visually reminds me of.
Fun fact, camels spit out part of their stomachs too to cool off.
Yeah, but also to be like, hey, look how cool and sexy I am. And I do not find the inside of your gut sexy, sir. Put it back.
It's weird.
Camels are weird.
To be fair, though, if I had a stone lodged in my mouth for God knows how long, that's the first thing I would do. I'd wiggle my tongue.
I would also be very excited to be able to move my mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But this is really the most sexually symbolic character that we have in the film. It will be relevant later on because, again, we're still building to where all the symbolism comes from. But for now, there are a couple thoughts in regards to his symbolism. Is that the barbed wires suffer at or wrapped around his eyes are some type of punishment to never stare at potentially prey again.
Okay.
As well, we get little hints that the way he's forced to crawl is that his genitals are being dragged on the ground.
Sure.
And also that he spreads his corruption like the other creatures that we've seen so far. But he also is potentially suffering from some venereal disease with the gross skin and the black tongue.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I'll get into it a lot more just because I'm being a little cryptic because it's...
Sure. I will say this because it is such a long-running and heavy theme of the movie that the standard audiences and, like, especially those familiar with the Christian symbolism, barbed wire, especially that on eyes and hands, does
Crown
not...
of thorns. Yeah.
And specifically barbed wire gets reinterpreted as anti.
Yeah.
So most of it, if it's appearing on the bad guys, only will be interpreted as it's a demon.
It's a perversion of faith. It's a perversion of their ideals and their symbology being used in a twisted and blasphemous manner.
I see where you're going.
Yeah.
But you are starting from a different starting point than most of the audience.
Yeah.
Most of the audience is going to start with the base understanding of Jesus and then devils, and the devils are always just opposite of Jesus.
Okay.
And so that's as far as that analogy goes usually.
Yeah, I'm looking into it too much.
Yeah, but but again, you're starting from a different starting point, so you're going to get to a slightly different endpoint than the standard Christian audience is going to.
Okay. Makes sense. And from this moment, he begins spreading filth in these bug-like creatures called creepers. Sperm forward.
I do like the bugs. Bugs are gross.
I said something further on. So the creepers he summons are made to be symbolically like sperm.
Sure, I read them as cockroaches.
Yes, and I'll get into it a little bit just a little bit later, because the creepers also do have an appearance in Silent Hill 2, but they have a different symbolism, as they are speculated in the film, specifically from the director, that it's supposed to represent religious cults and their destructive qualities, as well as their like numerous numbers, and like he mentions that they have their faces because they were all supposed to be creatures at one point.
Sure.
They were humans at one point. All the creatures in the Silent Hill movie were humans at one point or another.
Yes, but also cleanliness is next to godliness, and we got fucking cockroaches, so we're pretty far from fucking God.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how I went with it.
I agree with that. That's a very good analysis of it, because I went into my darker side of it.
Of course.
And so, in this moment, we do get little cuts back and forth between Rose and Christopher. Christopher is his name. You are right.
Sean Bean.
Sean Bean. Because they're in the same location, just on different planes of existence.
This is the part that bothers me the most, because I like this.
I do too.
I like this a lot. And then his cop buddy chauffeur is like, no, you're being silly, away from the potential of doing this for the rest of the movie.
Well, I think we both like it because it has similar feels to, like, Pogliot.
Yes.
Where, like, it's the cutting between of two very similar things,
yes,
but in opposite directions.
And this is the point where I think the film could have been received better and would have just been stronger in general. Is after the scene, he mentioned, like, it is well established that he can connect with the world that she's in. He's gonna go crazy, gotta try and figure out how to do it. I like that as a motivation, because otherwise his character really doesn't have anything going for him. Mm-hmm. However, we circle back around to this ability later on, which is good and jolly, but it feels weak and forgotten. And I think this could have been much better if his cop friend went off to go do this investigating. Yeah. And he stayed and played cat and mouse with her.
Yeah, I can see where that would have worked better. Because
honestly, he just kind of feels like an empty guy.
Yeah, because they do kind of try and play on that in the next movie, but, like, not in a good, like, well thought out way either.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those plot points where after you step back and think about it, especially after listening to this director, you can see where his thought process for it was, which I appreciate. Because he did put thought into just about all of this movie. Mm-hmm. However, this was one of those plot points where, like, it's so many layers below the surface that, like, it unfortunately is gone.
Yeah, his power basically is, like, if you're outside a restaurant and you can smell it, but he can smell it all the time just through different dimensions and only through his wife. It's a very stupid power to have.
It is, and, like, I feel like there was a potential there, but it's kind of one of those things where, like, if you paint a smiley face 6 layers below a layer of paint, is your intention for the smiley face still even there? Yeah. So, it was close. Yeah. But, and I like this part, but now we get to move on to Sean Bean's character just going and reading.
Yeah, pretty much. That's most of what he does the rest of the movie.
Which granted, like, we do need some backstory for the town. Yeah. And for the cult. And we do need to know more about this cop guy. But, like, so close.
He feels kind of like a lazy flashback.
He does feel like a lazy flashback. And he also feels, and he gets reestablished as just plot progressive backside. Yeah. Which is unfortunate because he could have been good. Yeah. He could have been actually useful.
He had the inklings, but
He did. Yeah, next time.
Yeah. And so, back in real Silent Hill, the reason they run into each other is because Rose fell through a opening thing, or because she saw Alyssa, like, just drawing some shit. Yeah, and she fell into the courtyard where, the iconic Red Pyramid, or also known as Pyramid Head thing,
I like Pyramid Head.
Or Pyramid Head, just for short, which is what I'm going to be referring to him because...
It's Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head. Know who he is. Yeah. We've seen the cosplays. Mwah.
Yes.
A good monster.
Because I love the industrial grunge of this moment.
Yes.
Because...
This is a good spot for it.
We see, like, the school's been replaced, like, the playground stuff's been replaced with, like, windmills and shit. Yeah. But now we actually have, like, a real... more threat to Rose than before.
Yes, and unlike the other monsters, this one feels much more sentient. Yes. The other ones all felt impulsive. This one feels plotted.
And there's a couple things. So, in the lore, Pyramid Head was an executioner of the cult in the past, but it's the fact that he has been used to turn the tides of judgment on the cult itself, which I will get into a wee bit because I'm getting ahead of myself just a little bit.
Yes.
But the difference between him in the game and the movie is that in the game he's supposed to be like a reincarnation or a symbolism, whereas Gaines has mentioned that no, this is actually a dude from hundreds of years or a couple hundred years ago. Yeah. Just this is what happened to him because that was his job.
Which I will accept because that's the logic for all these other monsters. And you can see that logic even without being told it to an extent. Like, if you really dig into, like, the thought behind it without being told, you could get to the conclusion that these monsters were one-time people from the town. Yeah. With the exception of Pyramid Head. He's the only one who doesn't fit that bill, and I do wish that he was the cryptid he's meant to be.
Yeah.
Because in the game, he is kind of the, like, ticking clock hands for you. You feel the ever-present, like, loomingness of him coming to get you.
Yeah, because if I remember right, in the second game, like, you can't actually kill him when your, like, first couple encounters. Like, you have to run.
You have to run. And he's also, in the game anyway, and a bit in the movie, he has kind of like a one-pace walk, which adds to that level of anxiety of like, okay, I've got to puzzle my way out of this problem, which I like. But because of that, he doesn't match the rest of the cryptids. Yeah. And most people have willingly accepted that and forgotten about that bothersome problem. But when the movie came out, this really did bother a lot of people.
Well, and it bothered people mainly because he's not in the first game.
Which is fair. Which is fair, because this was
surface level bitching.
It was, but also, like, unless you had time to go watch the interviews, which in 2006 wasn't really happening. Like, nobody did that. You had to be, like, next level nerd to be watching this on YouTube.
Me.
Yeah. So most people were under the impression that this movie was the first game.
Yeah.
Which is true, but not full.
Yeah.
Like, it was mostly the first game. But at this point in history, Pyramid Head's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
He's right up there with Siren Head, and nobody really cares.
I mean, he's in the new, it's almost a year ago now. He's in Dead by Daylight now.
Yeah, so, like, at this point, Pyramid Head himself has reached peak level while this movie continues its steady progress.
Yeah. So, as well, just a little side trivia, Pyramid Head was portrayed by Roberto Campanella, who also portrayed the Benton Half Dude, the janitor, and has a choreography and dance background.
And is very flexible.
Well, actually, so how they got the creature effect is his back legs are green screened.
Okay, good.
And he's got
I was worried.
Yeah, he's actually got like a prosthetic up the back of it.
Okay, feel much better about that, because Pyramid Head's body shape does not match Benton Half Man's body shape.
Oh, yeah, no. And on
Pyramid Head is nicely built.
Well, and on Pyramid Head, too, so this one is more angular than the other movie. Yes. Or other than the game. And also, he's on some stilts to make him 11 foot tall.
I appreciate. I like a tall cryptid. They feel better.
Apparently his ass was out most of the time because like that's how they had to like dress him. I mean,
cheeks out feels more aggressive than cheeks covered.
Well, and he's also wearing a human skin apron.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. He's very unsettling. Like, he is a threat. He
is a threat. And I think that's why most people, when you say Silent Hill, this is who they think.
Yeah.
Him and the nurses later on.
Yes. Yeah. Which that led down another rabbit hole.
Of course.
Yeah. And so, as Rose flees, she sees the creeper swarming and devouring the miners as she, and after she hits a dead end, she's pulled safely away by Sybil, who, they are not safe, because they try and barricade themselves as Pyramid Head still comes in.
It's a hit and miss for me with this part. I like the power that they show Pyramid Head having, like, clearly chopping through a metal door, love it. Stabby all day long. The scene's a little long.
It's a little long, but I get it too, because they still have... It still makes sense. I mean,
It ties all in.
Yeah.
It ties all in.
But it's mainly to bring Sybil and Rose together.
Sure. I mean... Oh no, not big titty policewoman. Don't die.
Oh no.
Oh no, I care so much about you.
But Pyramid Head's penetration of the room is very rapey and phallic in its manner, because I
can see how you get there because you already have a conclusion. I see it much more as a can opener.
Kind of.
It's a little 1950s stabby can opener where you just kind of had to like meet around the edge.
Yeah, but
I see how you got there.
Because one, it is a sword. It's penetrating with in this motion the intent to kill, but with the creepers crawling through, because we already know from the beginning they're kind of sperm-like in their symbology.
Again, because you'd already gotten there.
Yeah.
I see how you got there. I just read it as Nasty Filthy Man opening can of beans with his cockroach friends.
I will use that on future love interest. I'm open your can of beans, baby.
Yeah, there you go. That will work real well.
Well.
I guarantee that line.
Yes. And side note, from our follow-up from our last episode, because I did look this up, the opposite of phallic is yonic.
There you go. Now you know.
Now you know, and we have covered our asses.
Woohoo.
Yeah. And so they are only saved as the sirens go off and the world returns to normal.
Yes.
Which Sybil rightly freaks out.
I mean, she's the only one thinking it all right now. Let's be real. Rose is just going.
Rose is really chill. To be fair, she is trying to find her daughter. She is very focused.
She is very focused, but also, despite what the final intent of the director was, Rose accidentally got written as potentially insane.
Yeah, just a bit.
And I know the director has gone on many times being like, no. It's not all in her head. But unfortunately...
Yeah, it's the same stuff as like Tarantino and a few other directors equating King Kong to the transatlantic slave trade, even though like the guy who wrote the story is like, no, that's not what it's about at all. Like, but they're like, the symbology's there, dude. It's like, all right, whatever.
And unfortunately, Rose being incredibly calm about the literal hellscape she is in lends itself to, and also the mystery child that keeps running around. Yeah. Unfortunately lends itself to the Rose's nutso theory.
Yeah. Or she's become insane now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But her calmness allows them to look at the stone and find out that it belongs to a hotel.
Ooh, Hotel Stone.
And back in the real world, Christopher is shooed away from Silent Hill and begins his own investigation into his daughter's adoption.
He finally becomes the side character he was meant to be this whole time.
He is the backstory.
Yeah.
He is what should have been a prologue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even like, I don't know, a couple minutes of dialogue at the beginning.
A lot of his stuff could have been probably delegated to Rose, but
he's in the movie.
Yeah, he's there.
I mean, for someone who refused to play the video games before signing on to this movie, he does a good job. So yeah, it's good.
He does his part.
He does his part. It's Sean Bean. He can't complain too much.
And so Rose and Sybil find the Grand Hotel and a woman named Anna who is screaming and throwing stones at Dahlia. And we learned that Dahlia is an outcast, in the movie being fucking cryptic again, is an outcast that not even the darkness wants.
Which, as everyone with the standard background knows, she's a witch.
Yeah. Burn the witch!
Burn the witch!
We also learned that, also synchronicity, Dead by Daylight's new character is a witch.
Of course.
I told you, it's getting annoying!
And it's witch season. Oh, no!
Yes, I know. But from this, we also learned that there are even more people, as well as someone named Christabella, who's keeping them safe in the confines of a church, and that there's been these crosses that we've seen through the movie that are a symbol of their faith.
Christabella's name literally means beautiful Christ.
Interesting. Hi, Charlie.
He's very hungry.
Perfect timing. So there are some things I want to mention in this. One, I did try finding if there was any like direct ties to the symbol. One, not really.
Yeah, I mean, which is probably for the best.
But I can pull some stuff from it.
Sure.
So, first off, it has some similar features to duplication and kind of a perversion of Mercury, but it's also a perversion of the cross in the way of the female symbol. In a way. In a
real loose way.
Again, there is absolutely nothing. It's just my stupid trying to, like, dig deeper than there's actually to the movie.
Okay. I will say from a baseline Christian symbology going in, you don't fuck with the symbol of the cross, with the exception of which sector of Christianity you're in. Yeah. So, like, a circle around it versus how big that circle is, what location, the flower, that, Christian, Lutheran, all that sort of stuff dictates. This one is a mash/reversal of a lot of them. We've added a lot to it, which is usually a no-no, and also we've created something that you could argue looks like alchemy symbolism, which, regardless of what the symbol is, because that would not have been something they looked into, is just a big ol' no.
Yeah.
So we've reached witchcraft.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perversion of the beliefs.
Exactly. Roundabout way, got there.
Yeah, exactly. But in this moment, we also learn some stuff through Anna.
Yes.
And she says, and I do want to reflect, this is where I want to start reflecting back on some of the symbolism from earlier, because this is where it really starts playing out. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the Grey Children at this point. Because in the games, the Grey Children are primarily appear in the school, but in the movie, they are in the alleyways. Okay. I agree that between the two, they are the symbolism for the children from earlier, but in the movie, they are most likely, as Anna mentions, they have all the people who are stuck there have lost their children, and so this makes me believe that the Grey Children are not only symbolisms of the children that tormented Alessa, but they are also children of the cult who have lost themselves in the darkness into the hatred, and they themselves are consumed by the fires. That's why when they glow up, they're fiery. So they're because, as Gaines said, all the creatures that show up in the movie were people at one time.
Yeah.
So that's where the Grey Children, and I mean,
that doesn't feel too stretchy for me.
No, yeah, it ties in together, and I do have further thoughts on it that tie in later, but that is starting to be like where I get my ideas of what this, where a lot of the symbology is going.
Okay, I'm gonna put a loop in for you, because there's a symbology bit that I don't know if you caught, but is there, and knowing the director's intent is heavy-handed. So we have our three women now, and they are all standing together, and they, unfortunately, all look the same, but there's an intent and a reason. So policewoman is the most sexualized and shortest hair, tight-fitting clothes, and most likely to be burned as a witch.
Yeah.
Then we have our middle ground, standard, ye old normal woman set. And now we have our new cult girl who is dressed in what the traditional Americana, like, Christian cult would wear. Longer skirt, neck covered, arms covered, longer hair. Not long hair, longer hair.
So, I get where you're going. I don't consider Anna part of what I'll call the female trinity of this movie.
No, she's not. She's just a visual representation of the other two's potential.
And she's also their way to bring her in, or bring the church to them, kind of, to start bringing it in.
I will also say that the costume director and designers put in a lot more work than a lot of people realized for this.
Oh, yeah.
So not only have we, like I said, we've moved from, like, tightest fitting to most loose fitting clothing, hair choices, shoe choices.
Yeah.
But throughout the movie, example, Rose's clothes, there's over 100 pieces of Rose's clothing.
Yeah.
And they go from lightest red to most dark red.
Yeah.
Same thing with the police officer. She goes from being the most, buttoned up and police uniformed to as far down, but still recognizable in her police uniform.
Yeah.
Our dear lovely cult lady, she just gonna be cult lady.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
But she's dirty, and she is what one would qualify as pioneer style. Which is usually kind of how, like, the general concept of, like, cult people is interpreted as, like, very conservative clothing, women in dresses sort of mindset. Yeah. Whether or not that's true, that is the generalized thought.
Yeah. No, I get that. And so, back in the real world, Christopher breaks into the county archives and finds a clue to the adoption. Again, just another random bit that doesn't fit.
And also, like, to be honest, I didn't know... I had forgotten and then didn't care about this child's adoption.
Nope.
She could have been their own proper Satan-born, and I don't think it would have changed the movie.
Nope, not at all. And so, we return to the hotel where the trio finds, or can't find room 111, but we learn about the town's witch-burning history and a painting that hides the secret ritual room.
I like this scene a lot because this fits in with the, like, oh, you found the hidden room in the point-and-click game sort of bullshit, but it's done in, like, a good movie interpretation style where, like, we don't have to do a bunch of loop arounds to figure out that the painting's the thing. Like, we get a little bit of dialogue.
Yeah.
We try it. It works. Hooray. Which is perfect.
Yeah.
Which is something I kind of wish was a little more heavy-handed in this movie, because we only have a couple of, like, true puzzle-solving scenes.
Yeah, which
is fine.
It fits with, like, a movie instead of, like, a game of...
Oh, for sure.
Rotating the dog collar to find that it's got a button that turns into a key that I spent 2 hours trying to figure out.
I completely agree. I just think that this level of, like, running an action... pause puzzle works really, really well.
Yeah.
And then we move to mostly action.
Oh, yeah. Especially after this part, because we do really get, like, the background of stuff. Because also on top of that, we can infer that and this is where stuff starts to get even further corrupted. We can assume that the paintings are not necessarily sacred, but it'd be bad manners to do anything destructive to them, which...
It's one of the few things not destroyed in this frickin' town.
Yeah.
Like, even if it wasn't truly symbolic, like, come on, they've already got no windows and everything's busted. Leave the painting alone.
Yeah, but that's how they get through.
Yeah.
And while they're exploring, Rose finds the little girl in the blue dress crying in a corner and realizes it's not her daughter, but looks like her, but also realizes that it's Alessa because, look, I'm on fire.
Yeah, which I like visually. Good, spooky, scary child. The scene lends itself to the whole Rose is crazy. Just a little bit too much. I see where the director wanted it to go. But as a person who watched this roughly when it came out, totally was in the she's crazy camp.
Yeah, I never went down that rabbit hole.
The whole setting yourself on fire thing had been done... I don't remember what movie or what game, but it had been done rather recently. It was kind of one of those things where you're like, oh, you're playing off of that. Good. Like, I got you. Okay. I'm reading your message. And, like, that wasn't the message.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's also just hinting at the fate of Alessa that we haven't really seen yet. We can start inferring from the room, but...
We already know she's the devil. Devils are on fire. Devils are small children. Fact. Facts. Horror movie facts.
Actually, I've been going down a rabbit hole of, like, evil children movies here and there.
I'm telling you, it's a whole genre.
I know it is. And some of my favorite movies are in it.
Same.
Yeah. Hi, Charlie. Which, side note, Rhoda Mitchell actually did almost all of her own stunts of jumping across the beams for this one. As well, most of the cast did their own stunts when they were allowed to.
I mean, good for her. Again, it's one of those things where, like,
Yeah.
Little Minds of Moria, Pizza Heli, a little heavy-handed, but I get it.
Yeah.
It's
there.
It's there. I kind of wish that she just caught fire. Didn't really need the pit of hell.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's fine. And so, after she's brought back over to safety from a rope that Sybil throws over, the birds begin to freak out, and Anna guides them to the church. Also, how nice of this demon to just bring a bunch of birds into hell. Like, what did they ever do?
Not gonna lie, there's a lot of things that this demon just really fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, this whole first half of the thing. Like, the demon's goal is to get adoptive mother to the demon child so that we can finally do demon things and kill the cult.
Yeah.
Hooray! Why are we doing all this other shit? Why did we let policewoman in here? Did we just like big titties?
Yeah, like, or she was the accident that they let through. It's kind of like in those movies where, like, oh shit, you're still here, dude?
Why does the demon allow canned food to keep respawning? Why are these people not dead of starvation?
I don't think it's necessarily that she's letting them respawn, because they are foraging, and they it keeps being inferred that they're going further and further out from where they've had to go. And
I have lived in a small town in the middle of frick nowhere. There's not a lot of places to forage for canned food. You got like 2 options.
Well, Anna's not the brightest bulb either.
No, she's not.
There's a reason she's hunting for food in the hotel.
Yeah. I mean, she found canned beans, so she's doing something right.
Hotel's got to have a restaurant. Or at least a catering staff, maybe.
I mean, we've both been on those hotels where the best breakfast is a thing of pre-wrapped Pop-Tarts. And by pre-wrapped, I mean they took them out of the box and then put them on the counter for you.
Again, different upbringings. I'm used to like the German yogurt spread.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
This motel would have been fancy to have had like Little Debbie's.
I don't think I've ever actually stayed at a motel.
We'll go sometime.
Maybe.
We'll go on a road trip. We'll bring everybody. You can have your own room and fully experience the cockroachy goodness.
I'm good. And so, following the birds, the trio stop in front of a grand church as more and more people begin to arrive through the fog.
Yes.
As Dahlia tries to stop Rose from entering.
I like the forced perspective here.
Yes.
The church feels too big. Too tall.
Couple things on that, because I realized I wrote this in the wrong portion. Mm-hmm. The church is actually based on old Amish meeting halls.
Yes.
But with a typical church exterior and somewhat interior where the altar's been replaced with a painting. But at the same time, they wanted to make it feel more Masonic than Christian.
They succeeded in that.
The stairs were actually a set.
Nice.
So
a good blend.
The church is real. The stairs are not. Or the stairs are real, but they're
in a
not.
different
Yeah,
location.
Exactly. Because there's a graveyard in front of the church too, which is hella cool.
It is very cool. Though it's all like the exterior of the church just adds to the 1970s feel because it's small town.
The religious revival movements and whatnot, yeah.
But the fact that the stairs angle doesn't quite match the church helps to like add to this like, oh, the church is special. The church is different.
And in this moment too, we have another one of my favorite lines in the movie. Evil wakes in vengeance. Be careful what you choose.
It feels very video gamey.
Very video game cryptic, but also that, like you were saying, it's like very scripture-esque.
Yeah, it's definitely the heavy-handed, like, you will pick this option sort of thing. Yeah.
And so, as the others flee to safety, Anna stays to try and torment Dahlia just a little bit further, who, she summons Pyramid Head, who, this is the moment where I learned I push people too far with movie watching sometimes. I am sorry, Adrian. Specifically, that's the person who flinched at this moment. Actually, at my graduation party. Yeah. That's when I made people watch this. Because Pyramid Head proceeds to deglove Anna.
Yeah, and then toss her skin at the door, which then splatters on everyone. And, okay, here's the thing.
I love this scene.
It's a good scene. It reestablishes Pyramid Head as a cryptid, as opposed to just a monster. It is the only awkward child scene, though, in this movie. Because up until this point, we have relied on visual / a little bit of body horror and a lot of psychological horror.
Yeah.
And this is the only real gore scene.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, I love a gore movie. It's one of my favorite genres.
Yeah.
This is the only gore scene. If Pyramid Head had had more gore scenes, I think the audience would not have found this weird.
It's the only creature gore scene, too.
Yes. And which is I think the awkwardness, because this feels like this, for the average watcher, throws a weird wrench into their understanding of this movie. Yeah. Which is a lot of the complaint of this movie was like people didn't grasp the horror very well. Yeah. And I think part of that is because we danced around what horror it was.
Yeah, and I think also part of that too is because Silent Hill is very surrealist in its horrorscape.
Yeah, which up until like all of these elements do so well, but they do not cohesively do so. Yeah. Which is what a lot of people had trouble with, because they're like, okay, I get the psychological bit. Okay, I get the, like, symbology bit. I'm all for the creepy monster horror. I'm all for the strange imagery horror. And I'm all for gore horror, but we haven't combined any of those things in a way that, like, logics together.
It does stick out as a weird scene overall.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I love it. Yes.
Shush.
You're right, Charlie. Pyramid Head should have had more gore scenes.
Yes, you violent little bastard. But yeah, no, and then also, like, symbolically of smearing the blood on the door.
It's very in line with the whole Christian symbology.
Yeah, which, speaking of symbology, I'm going to go back into Pyramid Head, because this is the last time we do see him in the movie.
Yeah.
And specifically some of the religious passages we've seen before. Because his and Dahlia's summoning were always weird for me.
They were.
So I never really made this connection until rewatching. I always, like I said, I thought it was weird that she could summon Pyramid Head, but in earlier parts of the movies, there's that sign that says, "Do you not know that the saints will judge the world?" And so because Anna has stayed to fuck with her, Dahlia is judging.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see where you're going.
And I'll get to that with lines later on in the movie. Because at this point, it starts to kind of imply that Dahlia is a saint, and Pyramid Head, in a way, is an extension of this world's god. And that Dahlia is somehow able to tap into the darkness a little bit.
Sure.
Maybe not necessarily like it follows her will every time, but because she cursed her, she's creating that symbolism and spreading the energy out, causing Pyramid Head to make the appearance.
I totally see where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
I read it as Dahlia's also a cryptid.
That,
I mean, the first, 4 or 5 watchings of this, I was like, oh, well, that's because she's a witch.
Yeah, I get that.
She's a witch, and, she sent the sign of the devil horns at her, and, she's also outside the church. Don't be outside the church, fuckhead. The witch can, because she's a fucking witch.
Yeah, exactly. Even the darkness doesn't want her, so she can do whatever the hell she wants.
She's out here looking for cans of beans.
Yes. And so, in the church, Rose and Sybil are confronted by Anna's mom in the masses, but is saved by their religious leader, Christabella.
She's a witch.
Back to the real world.
What's Sean Bean doing now?
He is going to the orphanage, but the cop is there and forces him home.
I also appreciate that in Silent Hill world, the orphanage looks exactly like every other, fake orphanage that has ever existed.
Yeah.
Nuns and all.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but also it's eerily similar to the one from, Madeline.
I forgot about Madeline. Yeah.
It's I get it. It's generic yield nunnery orphanage.
Yeah.
And that's the formula for those.
Well.
But it is again, I don't care that she's a weird adopted child.
Yeah, I do care a little bit in regards to how some of the symbolism plays out. And we'll be getting to that part in a good little bit.
I would agree with you if it had been slightly different, because there's other movies that do the whole orphan adopted, it's actually the spawn of Satan, but in disguise. Been done, it's a whole category.
Yeah.
But we dance around it because of Sean Bean. Yeah. Unfortunately.
His part is badly paced in this movie.
It's unfortunately distracting.
Yeah. Because from his little 2-minute scene, we cut back to Silent Hill where Rose seeks to find her daughter in the core of the darkness, as we're told a little bit more, because the church has this another portrait of a witch burning, which...
A lot of witch burning.
The witch being burnt is supposed to look like a ancestor of Dahlia. It's the small details that he puts into this movie that no one gives a shit about.
I would agree with him if all of the women so far didn't look the same.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
If we had a family nose to work with, I would have been down for it. Or I don't know, family eyes, a cowlick.
Yeah.
A mole. I don't care.
Something different.
Something different, but honestly, we have one child to deal with for this whole movie, and all 3 women that I've truly dealt with, other than Cult Leader, who is supposed to look different. One's got bigger tits than the other.
Yeah. Your face blindness.
I am terribly face blind, but also pick something else.
You need diversity a little bit.
Especially if it's supposed to be a symbolic thing, where the reason it works for the little girls to be oh, it's
you're supposed to think it's the same.
Yeah, and it works because it's the same actress.
Yeah.
And so, like, there is no question. You're like, isn't that the same person? Am I crazy?
Yeah.
Like, that's how it works. But unfortunately, like, they had an artist interpret, like, what she looks like older. And unfortunately, she is a nice-looking middle-aged actress.
Yeah.
And so is everyone else in this movie.
Yeah, it's not like the mom from Eraserhead who they dirtied up and made a little bit uglier.
Like, even if we had had some, like a really predominant forehead, could have been down with, like, a nice big gap tooth thing.
Okay.
Something...
something to give a little bit more distinction for you.
Exactly. Or even, I don't know, label the painting.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. I like the effort.
Yeah. But in this moment, we do get what I think is the most important line to the overall theme of this movie.
Okay.
Mother is God in the eyes of a child.
Okay. I see why you picked that.
One, it's his remnant of his wanting to have an all-female movie.
Sure.
But it also ties in later on. And I've kind of hinted at, I hope I've left my own breadcrumb trails that people can follow along with.
Yes, you have.
Because at the entrance, we find out that the core of everything is in the hospital. But
because it always is.
It's determined that they are witches because Christabella sees an image of Sharon in the locket and reacts kind of the same way Dahlia does. And she's going to kill them.
I mean, she's a witch.
Yeah. But Rose is sent to the depths as Sybil sacrifices herself. But
needlessly sacrifices herself. She could have fucking gotten in the elevator.
Yeah.
Back up with her. Sybil! I get it. I know we have to sacrifice her. Game logic.
No.
But
gender role logic.
Yeah.
Because remember what I said. The general male roles and actions lead to death.
Normally I would agree with you. But
I'm good.
But here's the thing. Those are all views from the dude to the dude, and none of the women caught that. Because she's just a police officer standing in the line of duty.
Stereotypical male role in a movie.
Again, women don't catch it. Women don't care.
Yeah.
We saw her as being a little bit dumb. She's a policewoman being dumb.
Yeah. But
like,
yeah,
I get where the guy was trying to go.
Yeah. I mean, this is also like me having analyzed this movie like 2 times by this point. So,
oh, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'll get into it later because it's...
I think the symbolism of her being the most, like, independent, sort of, like, independent woman.
Yeah.
Like, registered a lot quicker and easier for most people.
Yeah.
Than, like, the further down theory that I think you're going with.
Yeah, it's me looking too far into this movie.
Which is fine.
Yeah. But to be honest, also at this point, like, their religion seems to actually be not completely wrong, because, I mean, it's kept back the darkness at bay, and, there's parts of the religious symbol that are outside the gates to the depths as well, so, like, it's doing something.
Potentially?
Yeah.
Potentially. I mean, there's a lot of weird loopholes to this weird hellscape that we've got, so, like, maybe it's working, but also, like, maybe they're all just here to be trapped in purgatory forever?
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Yeah. And so, into the labyrinth, Rose goes to find the iconic nurse creature who...
I like the scene.
Was inspired by Bubble Nurse from Silent Hill 2.
Yes. And honestly, out of all the cryptids, especially mass cryptids where we have, like, a mob going on, this one moves and looks the best, in my opinion.
Yes, and it is the for those who haven't seen what these nurses are based off, they're based off the very stereotypical busty push-up bra nurse.
It's a pin-up interpretation of World War II nurse.
Yes, which I actually went down a little bit of digging, because I grew up in around a bunch of medical people, so, like,
so you knew what real nurses looked like?
Exactly. BDUs or scrubs.
Yeah.
I've never understood that trope, but, like, I guess, like, it started off, like, way earlier, like, in the 1500s and stuff. Yeah. Like, it's a super old trope that I just guess we can't get out of our pop culture.
Yeah, and, like, it didn't help that the pinup culture of, like, post-World War II really, like, exasperated a lot of these, like, women in roles.
Yes.
Because, like, that was the thing, was to take a fill-in role here, put a busty lady in it. It's the equivalent of, like, those stupid Halloween costumes that every, like, first-year college student wants to wear, because, like, Mom and Dad can't see me be a busty kitty cat for Halloween. Rawr. Exactly. Like, no, you're dressed as a slut, Sarah. Like, calm down.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pinup thing, though. And, like, that was the point of pinup, was to be sexy.
Yeah.
And so, thus, long story short, we get to bandage creepy monster who's meant to be sexy.
Yes. And the way she moves is very they move is very creepy.
Yeah.
It's very
interpretive dance, but less fluid.
Yeah.
Jaggedy dance.
Yeah, it's that very... It's in horror films, or like those edgy high school girls who try and be like creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is pulled off well because, one, they're grungy.
They are very grungy.
But also it's their faces that are blurred.
Yes.
And so I'm going to get into the symbology of them a little bit from the get-go, because we're basically at the point where I'm going to start breaking down a lot more.
Also, like most of the cryptids in this, we never see them again.
Yeah. The nurse's symbology is about the jealousy of what's supposed to be the stereotypical beauties that Alessa's being surrounded with, but she also it's also symbolizing that she's never going to grow up to be what she could potentially be. And it's also her first lashing out around the world. Okay. Also around this point, the actresses were not told that they were going to have masks, and kept messing them up because they would they couldn't see in them. Yeah. And they would take them off after every match or after every cut. So, like, they have to go in and redo them. Yeah. And so, Rose gets through the nurses in a kind of stupid manner, but whatever. It ties back into the video game of creatures being tied to the light.
And, like, it does add a level of, like, that panic horror that you would feel during the game. So, like, meh.
Yeah, it makes me think of when we watched Underwater for, was it someone's birthday that we were watching? Yeah, it was Crystal's birthday. Yeah, we were up for Crystal's birthday. And, when we were watching Underwater, and it's that stupid, like, decoy moment bullshit.
I mean, like, it works.
Yeah.
Maybe not the most elegant way, but it works.
Yeah. But at this point, Rose has told the truth of all that's happened.
Surprise!
The town burned the witches. The town punished the sin, not the sinner.
Tisk tisk, cardinal rule here.
Yeah, the child, Alessa, deserved her revenge.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and also...
But also, like, she is now a demon, so, like...
Only because they never fully fulfilled the ritual. It was stopped halfway through. Yeah,
there's enough plot holes that you could make the argument of, like, this cult was one of those, like, fake cults that didn't know what they were doing and, like, creating their own
and
demons.
Accidentally fucked with some real magic bullshit.
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe, which I like.
Yeah.
I can dig, because we don't really get explained the magic in this world.
Yeah, basically, something happened, the chain snapped, and, like, their instrument of torture ended up catching the town on fire, and...
Whoops.
It was their faith that, unfortunately, brought them... The road to hell is paved with not so great intentions in this one.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's because of this backstory that most people have questions about, like, the logic in this town, because it's mentioned that, like, people were evacuated, but there's people still here.
Yeah.
The church burnt, but the church is still here. Like, there's a lot of questions.
There's missing timeline that's not explained in the movie.
Exactly, which is unfortunate, because I do think that the director had a lot of that worked out based off of how many details he bothers to put into this.
Yeah, because we do get some stuff of, like, the town didn't burn right away because Alessa was put into the hospital, and she'd been there a bit.
So a couple days at least.
But we also get the point of the cop was a good guy, same as Sean Bean's character. They're basically the same on parallel stories.
Exactly.
They are ultimately useless like all the men are in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minus Pyramid Head. He's useful. He murders people.
Yeah. but he's old-timey, so...
That's true.
Yeah. But we get that the demon came to Alessa and took Alessa's hate on, and that's when the town became corrupted. And what we see now, the demon lets those in and out. So at some point, as the town was probably being deserted, people just went missing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Heavily implied, never really explained. But
it definitely feels like maybe in a couple of cutscenes, this was all flushed out a little better. Because, again, the director more or less held your hand for a lot of this.
Yeah.
Just not this part for some reason.
Yeah.
I mean, it was getting kind of long at this point. I am under the impression that the child is a demon, and I am okay with that.
Yeah, this is unfortunately like a weirdly long movie for what it is.
It is, and unfortunately, I think a lot of that isn't necessarily down to the storytelling.
Mm-mm.
It's, unfortunately, the shoehorning in of Sean Bean's character. A lot of this could have been handled in a different way, including him and like how he's involved, and it probably would have been a little smoother.
Yeah, and maybe not as cryptic, because as we wake up from the found footage, we get a look at the actual the hospital room that is completely decaying and just burnt and dying.
Yeah, it's done. It's dead.
So in this moment, I'm going to start going back to some of the symbology and start wrapping some of that up.
Okay.
Because back to the Grey Children, I think they could also, at this point, now that we've learned the truth of what happened, they could also potentially symbolize the other children of the cult who have been sacrificed, because we know that this isn't their first go around.
No, they definitely, they already had the human sacrifice machine built, so, there is questions there.
Yeah. It's just one of those tie-ins that I think the Grey Children are more symbolic than initially are thought on, and I wish that maybe they had been incorporated a little bit differently.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, we get hints from other police cop guy ushering Sean Bean around that, he knew some stuff. He knew there was good people, though, in this town, so it leaves kind of a weird question of, how much of this town was cult town, and how much was there's a weird group across the street, but we don't fuck with them.
And why weren't these people persecuted in real life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions,
gray areas.
Very.
Yeah. But in this scene, we also have explained the rape of Alessa, and why the janitor is the most sexually symbolic character as well, because there's some other events that are gonna happen later that I will get to. Again, this is the really starting to break down of what I'm getting into symbolically. But also there's a little bit of a funny moment, I think, as Rose threatens to pull the life support.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna do anything.
I mean, we don't know, maybe this demon really needs it.
Oh, maybe. I also do want to say Jodelle Ferland, I don't care for her acting as Sharon, but her as the demon.
Yes.
She is so damn good in that role.
Which cracks me up because she had an interview that I found where she was like, I always kind of get cast into the demon role. And we're like, it's because that's what you're good at.
Yeah, because she was also in Orphan and a bunch of other stuff. I think
she does a good job playing a scary kid.
Oh yeah, exactly. But another thing I want to mention is also, I always thought it was odd how, the nurse is in the room, but I have an answer for that.
Okay.
I think this is the little bit of compassion shown on the demon's part. As we mentioned, the bubblehead nurses, the faceless nurses, are symbolic of her never being able to grow up to be a beautiful woman, and because she takes her anger out on arguably an innocent victim, because they say that someone who is undeserving of the rage, this is the only way that the demon can keep her safe from the darkness outside. And while she can't reverse what's already been done, she has maybe a little bit of compassion to keep this nurse alive just a little bit longer outside of something that she didn't deserve to be brought into.
Okay, I'll buy it.
Yeah, just a little something to explain why she's there. Again, all these theories of the creatures are speculation.
Oh, for sure.
No one ever actually says this in the movie. So, but that's the thing I love about Silent Hill, is because there are those hints there.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And so, back in the real world, the final cut until the end, the father's being escorted back to the county line. We get some small exposition about how Sybil's there because some kid was thrown
Blah,
in the
blah,
vent.
blah.
She's actually a good person. She's kind of motherly-ish.
Yeah.
It's a stupid part.
And honestly, the only real reason it's there is for you to be like, oh yeah, big titty policewoman. Oh, she's actually a good person.
Yep.
I don't care.
No.
Like, her whole role was to protect Rose, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
But now we are to the real start of the climax. Burn the witch!
Yes! Witch burning time.
Yes. Because now Sybil is burned alive as the magic rope and wood doesn't catch fire at all.
They're very unflammable.
I can maybe see if it was like prepared or was soaked or like fire treated like Sujibon, but
It's not.
No.
It's just... It's magic fire. It's there to burn witches.
Yep. Also, the ladders were actually based off German etchings of German witch burnings. Because, as we mentioned in our Hocus Pocus episode, witches weren't burned in the U.S., but they were in Europe.
They definitely were in Europe, but like Silent Hill has also reached a point where like nobody cares that they weren't burned in the U.S.
Yeah,
we've gone just full cult witch Bernie. We don't care.
Yeah, it's just adding our little history bits.
Yes.
Yeah, and so before Sharon is burned, Rose bursts in. Which, this is probably my least favorite part of the movie. I hate her big moment speech.
Oh, I don't care about it at all.
She's obnoxiously preachy, and like it doesn't add anything other than like somewhat try and force Christabella into stabbing Rose, but she didn't really need any motivation.
No, and it's also a little awkward because, again, whether or not the director intended it, the movie really lends itself to her being crazy, and the speech just kind of adds to it.
Yeah, it's like that. We had this woman, blue coat woman, I think was her name. That if anyone's seen that Tosh video, there's a crazy chick at like Government Hall. Yeah. That's from Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah. She used to do that stuff outside of campus.
Oh boy. Yeah, it just feels like weird, preachy, and like rambly.
Yeah.
Like nonsensical rambly. Where like I know what she has to say all pertains to wrapping up the movie.
Yeah.
But like we just got told that as the audience, and I don't care that she now knows.
Yeah.
'Cause like I was there too. We were all in this together, remember?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a stupid moment.
It is, but like if you're in the camp of like it's all in her head, this supports that.
Yeah, but it does bring that Rose begins bleeding into the church, and her blood is so black, and it's spreading the corruption further.
Oh, no, not black blood.
And retribution is at hand as Alessa begins her revenge, which I love this part.
It is very visually interesting.
I specifically want to talk about the brutality of her revenge, specifically on Christabella at this moment.
Okay.
Because while the others are being consumed and crushed by the barbed wire, her revenge on Christabella is particularly rough.
It is.
Because...
I mean, she does rip her in half.
And here's my thoughts. It all stems back to the janitor. Kids are cool. Because, yeah, they're throwing the books. Kids are assholes.
Yeah. Kids are assholes.
And the kids are reflections of their parents. But when Alessa is raped, it is the beginning of her true torment because she relates it back to Christabella.
Okay.
Because the rape is arguably Alessa's being forced into adulthood.
Okay.
In a way. But also Christabella is the main reason no one in the town treats her with any care outside of her mother.
Yes.
Because also Christabella's treating her of a witch leads to the children treating her poorly, which leads her to fleeing to the janitor, who takes advantage because he knows he can.
Yes.
So, in her own way, this is her way of sexually assaulting Christabella to death.
I see where you're going. Knowing that the director had a different ending in mind, this one feels weak.
I actually did not hear his alternate ending.
Okay, so the alternate ending, the ending that was wanted, was Pyramid Head was not meant to be one Pyramid Head.
Okay.
He was meant to be multiple Pyramid Heads representing Dante Inferno's levels of hell.
Okay.
And those other Pyramid Heads were meant to come and each Pyramid Head take a different section of the cult and put them through their own hells.
Oh, okay.
And so knowing that and seeing how he reinterpreted that into the barbed wire and the blood,
yeah,
I see where he was going. And I think he did a good job with what he had. But budget-wise, they couldn't animate that many Pyramid Heads.
Yeah, I completely I like the ending that he wanted to do, but I completely understand with what he went with.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it does tie back into... I do think with what he went with, my analysis of why she gets the barbed wire up the cooch.
I think
fits.
I think you're right. I just think his original ending would have been a more... poetic, I guess.
Yeah.
Symbolic way of going
it would fit. It would fit the symbology of everything else better because, I mean, I understand. I'm pulling at threads to tie into.
For sure.
Why Christabella is getting killed the way she is, and specifically the sexualization of her murder.
Yes, and I think the theory after the interviews that I've watched with the director and knowing which bits they had to cut, like the multiple Pyramid Heads, which would have been seen more times than just the ending.
Yeah. Because
the director mentioned, I can't remember which interview it was, but there was an interview where he is listing off all of the things that he thought were obvious that he was taking inspiration from for this movie.
Okay.
And a big one for him was Dante's Inferno, which, unless you know that and know all of the bits that got cut, you don't read it all, unfortunately. And knowing that fills in a lot of the weird holes and also lends itself to how you ended up at the plot that you did.
Okay.
Because I do think that was part of the plot he was trying to go for. But unfortunately, with the way things got rewritten and cut and rescheduled, it, instead of lending itself to his direction, which is what you ended up at, it lended itself to how a lot of people ended up interpreting it, which is it's purgatory and or all in Rose's head. Yeah. Which, maybe not wrong, but not the full picture.
Yeah. I can see where mine is more true to the representation of the movie itself. Yeah. Compared to what the potential was and what the game actually, or what people were trying to pull the game into the movie's representation. Okay. Yeah. I get that. But yeah, so the cult is killed.
And now we get the weird ending.
Yeah, because all are dead besides Dahlia, Sharon, and Rose. Yes. But Sharon is not the same.
No, she's Demon Sharon.
Or Fusion Sharon. Yeah. Because, I want to backtrack a little bit to some of the symbology. Okay. Because it just made me think of the nunnery. Because, in a way, the demon delivering the baby to the nunnery is her delivering her to a non-perverted, in this movie's world.
Safe.
Yeah, a safe religious space compared to what she's been grown up. That's what I wanted to say on that bit.
Okay. If the nunnery / orphanage had any more weight, I think more people would have gotten there.
Exactly. Again, me reanalyzing this movie multiple times. But yeah, so after in this moment, Dahlia says, "Why am I still here?" Because she feels guilty for bringing Alessa to the cult. And Rose responds with, "Mother is God in the eyes of a child," hence tying back into her saintliness and why she has some influence over the darkness, and why the saints will judge the world.
I totally see where you're going. I still was in the, because you're a fucking witch.
And I'm a nerd, so yeah, I got into that shit. So, yeah. But Rose takes Sharon to return home, but not really.
Nope, it's a fake world.
We have Mies van der Rohe chairs.
At
the
least
MR90 chairs.
Yep, which are very fancy.
But they're used in everything.
They are used in everything. There are other chairs, my peoples.
His and the Corbusier chairs.
I mean, don't get me wrong, they're very striking. They are beautiful. Again, there are other chairs.
Yeah. And so Christopher senses Rose and wakes up to see an open door, but no one is there as the credits roll, and yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this is the part where my one and only theory comes in.
Okay.
So, we well established that husband Sean can tell when wife is, like, within the same vicinity of him.
Yeah.
So does this man just get to slowly go crazy with a ghost in his house? The ghost of his lost dead wife?
Maybe.
Because as the movie establishes that, like, she can interact with his world, she opens the doors, which means this man's dead child's toys are going to move. Things are going to move around his house because they live in this house, but in a slightly different reality.
Yeah.
He's going to smell her perfume everywhere he goes, even though she's been gone for years. I would like the sequel to be about this man going nuts.
I would too.
It's not, but like that would be cool.
Yeah, I like that. It's a nice, somewhat happy, poetic end to the game. That's kind of reflective of what I know of the ends, because I forgot to look up all the endings of this game actually. But I mean, for a movie wise, it's fine. It works.
It's okay. Again, if Sean's character had been maybe done a little differently, I feel like this ending could have been a little bit more impactful.
Yeah.
In reality, it just left a lot of people confused, to the point where, like, if you type in, like, Silent Hill ending explained, like, the first 10 videos that come up are people trying to explain the ending to this freaking movie.
I have no explanation other than what I'll get to in our conclusion of this, so...
Which is unfortunate, because the director does go into, like... He explains, like, he clearly thought of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie, every detail, he loved this game, so he has all of this in his head. It just didn't quite make it to the audience, which is unfortunate, because, like, he does go through and, like, I don't think anyone's blatantly asked him what the ending means.
No.
Because he has gone through and explained everything he can, and I think at this point it's just kind of like that awkward, like, I've known you for how long and I don't know your name still kind of situation. Which is unfortunate, because, like, I do think that he has a solid answer for us.
Yeah. And
it's just, unfortunately, lost in translation.
Yeah. Well, and so, not to dwell on the ending, because there is not an answer that we can provide. No. And I have no analysis of it other than...
I like to think it's purgatory.
I have no clue. But Silent Hill was financially successful. I mean, it wasn't well received by critics, but it has mixed reviews with fans.
Yeah, again, it depended on what side of the, like, video game line you sat on.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, most of the people that I know who hate this movie, their main gripe seems to stem from the fact that they said it was the gender swap, and then also, like, creatures appearing in the first, or in the game or in the movie that weren't in the first game, that kind of shit.
And a lot of the complaints that I found that were similar were from people who were looking for more of a true adaptation from game to movie.
Translation is what I'd say.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is so, one, I'm sorry if that's your thought. I think you're full of shit. Because, and here's the thing, because I'm judging this film from the overall theme of the film adaptation, and that's what I'm going to say. It's an adaptation.
Sure.
It's not a translation, it's an adaptation. And the gender swap wasn't a lazy one, as a lot of people like to harp on.
No,
because, and also, like, the lazy gender swaps we see today.
Yes, and I think that's why a lot of people's tones have changed with this movie since it came out. Because when this came out in 2006, there wasn't the swarm of gender swap sequels that we've had nowadays. And it also, we didn't have the overwhelming tide pool of translation movies, where it is word for word the exact same thing, or as close as you can get, and it just wasn't good.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people now have gotten to the point where, like, if people revisited Silent Hill and hadn't seen it before, I think it would do really well.
Yeah.
Because people have gotten over this idea that, like, it needs to be a complete reproduction of the show.
Exactly. And we've seen some examples of that in, like, Sonic the Hedgehog and Detective Pikachu, where they are what we want to see in adaptations.
And people, and especially with Sonic, once people, like, started to really, like, get into it, as opposed to just seeing some trailers here and there, I have yet to meet anyone who didn't like it, even if they're not Sonic fans.
Oh, well, my brother shut it off after 25 minutes. He hated it. But then again, it's not aimed at him. I was
going to say, your brother's a little old for the target demographic.
But he liked Detective Pikachu.
Not too old for the target demographic, I would argue.
And
I would
also,
argue Detective Pikachu was aimed at his age range.
And also, he's a Pokemon master, so...
There you go.
Yeah.
He, again, Detective Pikachu aimed directly at him.
Yeah.
Sonic aimed for a slightly younger audience just getting into Sonic.
Exactly. And so, my thoughts on why this isn't a lazy gender swap is how the observation of the gender roles in movies that I've kind of hinted at and talked about as we've gone on, and specifically based around the line, "Mother is God in the eyes of a child," and specifically the demise of certain characters and the uselessness of men in the movie. And I'll get the men out of the way right now, since their roles are relatively minor, but they are important to show that while you might have the heart, your heart might be in the right place, you can still be too late or unable to do anything, as the police officer is unable to carry Alessa off in time or save her. And also, Sean Bean does jack shit this whole movie, besides provide backstory.
He does.
And exposition. But at the same time, Sybil, even though she has like her little bit moment of like heroism and like a little bit of motherliness of like why she's concerned for Rose and her kid. But of the women to survive, Rose and Dahlia, the two stereotypical feminine characters. Stereotypically motherly characters.
Okay, so this is the part where... Because I ran into this interview with the director too. And this is the part where I think for a stereotypical dude or 2006 mindset, I would agree with you.
Yes.
However, the characteristics that the director himself laid out as motherly for this movie, and like these were the two, was caring about the child.
Yep.
That is just called being a parent.
Yep.
And crying. Which, if I remember right, is the only fucking thing the main male character does in the video games.
Yeah, he doesn't do much.
Yeah.
He's kind of a cardboard cutout at times.
And so, like, while I think the end goal of the mother symbology works and is good and does add a lot to this movie, I think the seed plant that the director had... It
doesn't get fully fleshed out like we would want to see.
No, I think it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where, like, the characteristics that he gave of a mother are that they cry and they care about a kid. Those aren't motherly characteristics at all. There's other ones he could have used that would have been better, stronger, and would have given his point across better.
But in comparison to the other parts of the female trinity, the Christabella, the religious leader, which is stereotypically a male role, and Sybil, I'm talking in stereotypes.
Yes, I would give you the role-wise, you're correct. But the characters and the characterizations and the dialogue that they're given are not male.
No.
Nor are they female.
They're just characters.
They're just character dialogue.
Yeah.
And so, like, while I agree that the idea is good,
yeah,
I think the reason a lot of people didn't end up at the same place that you did, even though you've studied this movie twice, and is because the core nuggets of the gender roles that he's trying to use aren't gender roles.
Yeah.
At all. Like, they're just characteristics
of
a
jobs.
Person. They're either jobs or they're characteristics of a person. The closest he gets with, like, the gender roles is the differentiation between the three women and their, like, stereotypical role throughout. Yeah. But it's so lightly done that no one gives a shit.
Exactly. But at the same time, it is a great example of just, like, that bare bone concept of...
Oh, sure.
The stereotypical male roles die horribly.
Sure.
And the mothers live.
Sure. I just think that if he had real conversations with, like, what that truly looks like, whether that was overexhaustion and underappreciation of stay-at-home mothers, the realization of, like, actual, like, the part that makes you mother, like, caring, bearing children, the nuggets he picked aren't mother nuggets.
Yeah, it's just parent nuggets. Again, roles.
Yeah, and I know he tries to put it on to the other characters, but the only reason that they read as mother at all is because they're shown as female. You could have made the same argument if they were male. They're just roles.
Yeah, and I think that just ties down to, like, maybe budget constraints, and like you said, like, maybe he wasn't able to fully flesh it out.
I do think so, which is unfortunate because the idea is really good. The symbolism where it is good. The jumps you have to make to get to it, unfortunately, just don't work.
Yeah, it's a little too stretched, and I
which is
admit
too
that.
bad. Yeah, which is too bad because, like, it could have been really good.
Yeah,
it could have been a really good horror franchise. Yeah. I think the thing, unfortunately, being in the way is that it's trying to be Silent Hill.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, I think part of that is because we've matured since we've seen this movie.
Oh, for sure.
And also we've seen better examples such as, like, the Babadook.
Oh, yeah. Or even Mama.
Yeah.
Like, there's a way to do, like, the stereotypical mother versus the non-traditional versus feminine roles in general.
Yeah.
And, like, you could even argue that there's some B movies that do it really well.
Oh, yeah.
I think the thing holding this one back is, unfortunately, like, A, budget constraints, and, like, B, it's a sad point of, like, he had a really good train to run with, but he had a bad engine. Yeah,
it's a lack of depth to the characters that really drives those points, other than they're basically fulfilling the role that's presented to them.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a big part of that was Sean's character wasn't supposed to be in this movie at all. Yeah. Like, at all. No. The production set told them no, that they needed a male lead. Yeah. Before they would fund them. And so they had to shoehorn him in, which is why he feels awkward and weird. Yeah. And so I think if they'd had more time to deal with, like, not just rounding him out, but having, like, a proper sounding board as opposed to, like, the production troupe, which is supposed to be your sounding board for, like, oh, you have a good idea, but you need to add this nugget, or you need to, like, follow up here and here. Instead of having that, they had someone who went, oh, there's no dude, no one will pay money to see it. Yeah. Which is too bad, because I think if they had more, like, instead of an echo chamber between themselves, if they'd had more back and forth, I think this could have been the perfect one.
Yeah, and especially, like, if Gaines had been able to do his full female cast, like,
yes, I think it would have helped a lot.
And I think it would have been more interesting than the kind of, like, translation with, in some ways, a somewhat lazy gender swap. Yeah. But not really because of his original intention. And I also think Gaines' sentiment, in the interview, he stated that it may not be the best adaptation, but it's the most faithful. And I think
I agree with that.
And I think that's true, because he did nail the feel of Silent Hill. Definitely. Same with the first Resident Evil movie. They nailed the feel of it, and then they just fucking lost the plot after that. Yeah. And on top of that, like, I mean, it's not the best horror film, but
it's not a bad horror film.
No, exactly.
Like, it's watchable.
Yeah, there is those inklings of stuff too there that I think makes it important.
I think something that also would have benefited this movie a lot is listening to the director talk, and specifically when he was looking for either people to work on this movie or actresses and actors to be in this movie, he specifically was looking for people who had a more art-based standing, which normally that process has a lot more back and forth. There's a lot more input from outside sources. And unfortunately, because this wasn't an art film, it was a big production. They had the overlords who must approve all things good and evil, and also, like, the budget constraints. Yeah. He was one of, like, there were people who were passionate about this, working on it. He was the only one passionate about Silent Hill working on this. Everyone else loved the script that he sent them. Everyone else loved the costumes that they got to work on. They loved the idea. He was the only one in the Silent Hill fandom who had any, like, proper, like, put into, like, dialogue or, like, the screen in general.
So, and so in a way that makes me think, like, maybe as much as he loved it, maybe he wasn't the right director for what he intended, because he's a genre director. Yes. And the way he approached Silent Hill was from an art house approach.
And I think if he had been allowed to do a proper art house interpretation of this, as opposed to art house that has to be reformatted to go for big screen, I think this could have been the perfect adaptation.
Yeah.
Because then he would have had someone else standing alongside him, maybe not a director, maybe it's a writer or a photographer, who are standing there going, hey, I'm also a freaking huge fan of Silent Hill. I like where you're going, but have you considered this and this?
Well, and I like what you put earlier too. I mean, it's, I think viewing it now, people would have a different appreciation because
definitely,
one, as audiences and by extension filmmakers, we're learning that adaptations don't have to be that direct translation. Again, Sonic the Hedgehog, Detective Pikachu.
Yeah.
And are more so telling a story based around the games with changes to make it actually for the screen. But I don't know, because I mean the movie was successful enough to spawn a horrible sequel.
It's not good.
Which Gaines said he didn't want to work on because they were going to Resident Evil-fy it, and he said Resident Evil's not an action, or Silent Hill's not an action movie.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but at the same time, like, he also went ahead and, even though this was a most adaptation of the first one, he went ahead and, because of his limitations, put in the others games into this one.
Yeah.
So he was kind of out of, like, solid stuff to work with without feeling repetitive.
Yeah, and on top of that, he did mention the reason he included stuff from the newer games was because by the time he was making the movie, they had to incorporate it because Pyramid Head and the Nurse are too iconic.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those instances where, like, this, it's good. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
It could have been a lot better.
Exactly. I get that.
And not even in, like, the normal, like, game adaptation where you have, like, you're like, oh, they just missed the mark. Like, it's all there. It's all in his head. It just didn't make it because it was big budget.
Yeah.
Because it was standard going on film, going to the movie theater sort of movie.
Yeah, you got executives to please, so.
Yeah, which, in this case, is unfortunate.
Yeah, so. At the end of it, Chris, do you recommend watching Silent Hill now?
To a group. There's a group of people who I think are going to love Silent Hill.
Yeah.
It's not Silent Hill fans.
No.
It's going to be my friend who likes a little bit of horror. They'll watch the top big ones that come out every year. They do the Halloween horror nights. This is for them. Yeah. This movie's great for them. The visuals are scary. There's a couple spots where the CGI maybe hasn't kept up, but it's not that bad. Yeah. And for the most part, the monsters are good. You get quite a few of them. They're not in too long. It's good. It's a good horror movie. It's just not a great horror movie.
No, I completely agree with that. There are, rewatching it after reviewing probably hundreds of movies now, or maybe a couple hundred, but It has its charm, it has its nostalgia for me. Yes. But it's not nostalgic enough where I can gloss over those little bits, because like I said, her big moment speech is rough. The cop's rough. Yeah. Sean Bean, although I appreciate his symbolism as pointless in the movie, his parts bog down the movie. Yeah. And knowing more about it, I do wish Gaines had a better shot at it.
Yeah, I will say, there is a small group who I will say you need to go back and rewatch this. Yes. And that is the people who kind of liked it the first time. Yeah. And, like, you were those people who, like, didn't say anything when your friend bitched about how stupid the ending was and all that. Now, go through, watch all of the stuff from the director, read all of his interviews, and going with that knowledge, you're going to like this movie a lot more.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, definitely, if you've listened to this episode,
then you're the person to watch this.
Yeah. I don't recommend going into the lore and symbolism like I did, because a lot of it is a bit of a stretch at points, but I do think if you're into that stuff, it's there. There are the inklings, and you'll come up to different conclusions, like we talked about in Eraserhead, where like this movie is going to be a personal watch for you. Definitely. Where it's not going to be the exact same viewing that I came across. Same with you, where like we came to similar points, but we came at them from completely different trajectories.
Definitely. And so, like, yes, there's an audience to watch this. Everybody? No.
Yeah, no.
No.
No, I mean, it's not for everyone. I mean, it is like, I do think it is one of the best early game adaptation movies.
I completely agree. And again, if light horror, like the general, like, I gotta put on a spooky movie, you haven't seen this one, give it a go. It's a good Halloween flick.
Yeah, it's something we could honestly have watching background with Erica around.
Yeah, there's only 2 scenes where I'd be like, all right, you need to go get a snack.
Yeah.
The rest of it, it's just spooky monsters. And there's some good-looking monsters.
Yeah, exactly. I think Gaines got what he could at the time for it. So,
Definitely.
But
he did his best.
yeah, but yeah, man, that's us kicking off spooky season.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. So, but anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.